Swish! 1 day later, Xianxia suddenly stopped moving, and an enormous azure blue star was appeared in his field of vision. It was Damon's star. According to the label on the map, Damon's star was already situated at the central region of Nightmare Battlefield, and if one went deeper, one would arrive at the core region of Nightmare Battlefield. I finally arrived here. Xianxia's entire body felt relaxed. He'd been constantly flying in the starry sky throughout this short period of a day, and he'd passed through almost 1,000 stars and encountered countless dangers all along the way. There were areas where the starry sky was suddenly severed. There were areas where spatial tempests swept about. Moreover, he'd even suffered a variety of surprise attacks that came from xeno-race experts or strange monsters that resided in the starry sky, and she didn't recognize most of them. It was even to the extent that he'd almost fallen into a black hole while teleporting once, and it terrified him to the point he broke out in cold sweat. The black hole was no joke because once one fell into it, then even a Saint Immortal would be powerless to struggle free from it and would be instantly swallowed and crushed into powder by it. Even one's soul would be unable to escape. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to encounter a single golden Immortal realm xenorace expert all along the way. Xianxia checked his violet ribbon star crest and noticed that the number behind his combat exploits record was still 9. In other words, if he wanted to attain the minimum requirements to pass the inner court exam, then he would at least need to annihilate another 91 xenorace experts at the golden Immortal realm. I hope I'll be able to encounter a good amount of them on Damon's star. Xianxia took a deep breath, and then he stopped hesitating and flashed towards the distant Damon's star. Roar! However, before Xianxia could approach Damon's star, a world-shaking roar suddenly sounded out from Damon's star, and then an enormous beast shot into the sky. Its limbs were like enormous pillars that could hold up the sky while its back was covered in a layer of inky green armor that seemed like rocks, and it had a head that seemed like a small hill. At this moment, there was actually a slender figure standing proudly atop it. This is a dark-armored divine turtle. It possesses boundless physical strength, and it's a variant beast in the Void Sky world. That figure standing on it is probably a member of Void Sky world. The tiny cauldron guided him casually and said, "Watch out for that expert from Void Sky world. They're skilled in the grand Tao of sound that kills imperceptibly, so you have to be vigilant against it." Xianxia nodded in his heart. He'd already noticed that he'd been locked onto by the intent of the xenorace expert. Obviously, this xenorace expert had come with the intention of targeting him. However, he was just worried about having no golden Immortal realm xenorace expert to hunt and kill. Yet one had actually come charging at him now, so he naturally wouldn't let this xenorace expert go. This member of Void Sky world had a handsome appearance and slender figure. He wore light gold-colored luxurious clothes and had an appearance that was no different than an ordinary person. The only difference was that his skin was suffused with a faint silver glow, causing his bearing to seem rather divine and feminine. So, it's a fellow Taoist from the 3 dimensions. I'm Lan Ting from Void Sky world. I wonder if fellow Taoist is interested in listening to a song of mine. The xenorace expert from Void Sky world whistled over atop the ink-armored divine turtle. He stopped 3 kilometers away from Xianxia before his slender and fair palm flipped, and a 60 centimeters long bamboo flute that was round, translucent, and verdant appeared on his palm. This bamboo flute had a total of 9 holes, and each one of these holes were scarlet red and beautiful like blood, and they were suffused with a shocking fluctuation of energy. "I'm not interested." Xianxia refused without the slightest hesitation. As he spoke, he even withdrew Starclasp with a clang. Roar! The ink-armored divine turtle's lantern-sized eyes suddenly flashed with a ferocious light when it saw this, and then it let out a roar that sounded like muffled thunder. "Fellow Taoist, why fight as soon as we met? Listen to a tune of mine and I'll immediately move aside for fellow Taoist to pass. All right?" The gold-clothed young man who called himself Lan Ting smiled warmly before directly placing the bamboo flute by his lips. In the next moment, a strand of a refreshing tune of the flute that sounded like the sound of nature drifted into the surroundings. Expanse after expanse of hazy rain of light actually drifted out from space while fresh flowers descended. And then the figures of faintly discernible and charming young women surged into appearance. Some played the zither, some played the flute, Some were singing loudly with clear voices, and all of this perfectly fused with the tune of the flute in the young man's hands. It emanated a peaceful, happy, and harmonic aura that penetrated the depths of one's soul. If this wasn't the nightmare battlefield, then anyone who saw this scene would clap and exclaim with praise while enjoying it to the extreme, because such a divine tune was indeed something that was extremely rare in the world of man. But Xianxia acutely noticed that along with the sound of this flute resounding, the gray haze, meteors, and clouds were obliterated without a sound and vanished into thin air. Even space itself was corroded by the shapeless force, and it revealed numerous shattered rifts and cracks. The tune moved silently, yet its might was extremely shocking. At practically the exact same time that the tune entered his ears, Xianxi's mind droned while the terrifying scenes of devils roaming about, ghosts and monsters howling, corpses that were piled into mountains, and blood covering the world appeared. This force was cold, gloomy, ghastly, and overbearing, and it ceaselessly charged and corroded his soul and Tao heart. If it was anyone else, it would be utterly impossible for them to resist and avoid such an unforeseen event. However, the Fuxi divine statue resided in Xianxi's sea of consciousness, while the river diagram fragments protected it as well, and his cultivation in the Tao heart had even attained the heart-soul realm. So even though this tune was terrifying, it was no different than an itch to Xianxi. He just looked calmly at the xenorace expert from the void sky world while silently listening to the rune, and he seemed as if he was utterly unaffected. Lan Ting noticed that something was off, and he frowned. The bamboo flute in his hand emanated a blue radiance that filled the sky while the tune became more and more lively, and it was like a gurgling mountain spring that resounded throughout the heavens and the earth. At this moment, space exploded into pieces inch by inch while the meteors transformed into ash, and an area of 5,000 kilometers in the vicinity seemed as if it was torn apart by a shapeless hand and suffered terrifying destruction. On the other hand, Xianxi stood alone amidst this chaos. His clothes fluttered, yet nothing could harm him. Humph! Lan Ting's handsome face flushed lightly when he saw this, and then he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood essence that sprayed onto the bamboo flute in his hand. Thus, the tune of the flute suddenly changed and actually became powerful and forceful. It carried extreme force and formed into the illusory figures of numerous mighty titans that roared as they charged at Xianxi. "Is that all you've got?" A wisp of a piercingly cold smile couldn't help but suffuse the corners of Xianxi's mouth when he saw this. In the next moment, he took a step in space before his figure vanished into thin air. Swish! A moment later, a wisp of a dazzling and rippling strand of sword chi swept out, and it slashed through space as it swept over. Everywhere it passed, the illusory figures of titans were annihilated, and they were practically unable to resist that wisp of sword chi at all. How could this be possible? Lan Ting was stunned. No matter how he racked his brains, he was unable to figure out why Xianxi wasn't affected by the tune he played. Roar! The ink-armored divine turtle suddenly raised his enormous limb and slapped it down towards the sword chi Xianxi executed. Unfortunately, it had underestimated how terrifying this strand of sword chi, and its limb was directly severed, causing inky green blood to spray throughout the surroundings. Moreover, its howls of pain filled the entire sky while its entire body swayed violently. This scene instantly caused the infuriated Lan Ting to return to his senses, and his handsome appearance distorted, causing him to have an extremely hideous appearance. He'd finally realized that this native of the 3 dimensions before him was extraordinarily formidable, and it caused his laws of sound to be unable to bring forth even a shred of its might. "Let's go!" Without any hesitation at all, Lan Ting patted the head of the ink-armored divine turtle, and then he turned around and teleported away. Right at this moment, space suddenly started vibrating and droning around Lan Ting's body, and it seemed as if the space in this expanse of the heavens and the earth had been controlled by someone at that instant, causing Lan Ting to actually be unable to teleport. This is the spatial laws? Lan Ting was astounded and extremely horrified. Before he could recover from his shock, a wisp of sword chi silently flashed out from the space behind his neck, and then it slashed down and sliced off his head with a swish. Blood shot out from his headless corpse and sprayed onto the entire ink-armored divine turtle, causing this variant beast to let out an extremely furious howl while its eyes instantly became completely blood-red while it stared fixedly at Xianxia. Rumble. Its legs stomped on the ground while its entire body blazed with surging blue flames, and its imposing aura instantly became extremely violent as it charged abruptly at Xianxia. I never expected that this beast would be so loyal. Alright, then I'll let you die in a more direct manner. Xianxia was just about to slaughter this ink-armored divine turtle with a single strike when an ear-piercing hissing sound resounded, and then a strand of flowing light suddenly shot out explosively from Damon's star that was behind it. After that, an enormous bang rumbled through space before more than half of the enormous ink-armored divine turtle's body was blasted apart by the strike. It didn't even have the time to let out a shrill howl before it was dead. Xianxia's face instantly sank when he saw this, and his gaze swept towards the distant Damon star. A thin and tall figure stood extremely far in the distance. He had a gloomy bearing and vicious expression. Shockingly, it was Wuxia who was ranked at the second position on the All-Heaven Golden rankings. At this moment, there was a large and ancient bow in his hand, and that strike from before was obviously executed by him. Moreover, there were a few figures standing by Wuxia's side, and all of them were disciples of the Wuxia clan that were ranked in the top 50 of the All-Heaven Golden rankings. Haha. Sorry, I thought that beast didn't belong to anyone. See you later, Xianxia. I hope I'll have the chance to see you again. At this moment, Wuxia looked at Xianxia as well, and he feigned surprise as he roared with laughter. And then he waved his hand and led the others to turn around before instantly vanishing without a trace. Xianxia didn't chase them because it was pointless. According to the rules of the inner court exam, students fighting each other was prohibited. Even though one could kill another without anyone knowing, once a shred of news about it was exposed, then the consequences were absolutely not something Xianxia was able to bear. It was precisely because he was clearly aware of this that Xianxia's expression was slightly gloomy. This ink-armored divine turtle was in existence at the Golden Immortal realm at any rate, and it would be equivalent to killing a xenorace expert at the Golden Immortal realm once he killed it. Yet never had he expected that Wuxia would actually take advantage of the situation, and this caused Xianxia to feel rather infuriated in his heart. Seizing the prey of others? This method isn't bad as well. Xianxia took a deep breath before his expression returned to normal, and he decided in his heart that he would find a chance to follow Wuxia and the others from nearby. So long as they were hunting Golden Immortal Realm xenorace experts for the exam, he would seize the opportunity to snatch their prey away. After that, Xianxia suddenly realized something, and his sharp and slanted brows raised as he said, "Senior, these fellows have actually made an appearance on Damon's Star as well. They wouldn't have come as well for the sake of the fortune you spoke of, right?" Xianxia's words caused the tiny cauldron to be momentarily stunned, and then it pondered deeply before it said, "According to my knowledge, that place where fortune resides is hidden within a spatial tide. If one isn't aware of its pattern, then entering it is equivalent to giving one's life away. However, we can't rule out the possibility that they've grasped a method to enter it." Xianxia couldn't help but ask when he heard this, "Senior, then what actually is hidden in that place?" The tiny cauldron went silent for a long time before it said, "It's the tomb of a great figure from the primeval times." The tiny cauldron's voice actually carried a slightly complicated tone. However, Xianxia didn't notice it as his attention was completely drawn by the content of the tiny cauldron's words. A great figure from the primeval times? Tomb? Xianxia was truly unable to imagine exactly what cultivation realm that existence possessed to be able to be called a great figure by the tiny cauldron, and it was even a figure from the primeval times. Come, you'll understand once you enter the tomb. I only hope that it hasn't been taken by another." The tiny cauldron sighed faintly before falling into silence. Meanwhile, Xianxia noticed that the tiny cauldron's mood was obviously downcast. This caused him to be unable to help but be stunned, and he silently guessed that there was a relationship between the tiny cauldron and this great figure from the primeval times. Xianxia shook his head and didn't think any further because he wouldn't be able to figure out anything even if he continued. Subsequently, he didn't stay here any longer. He cleared up the wealth in Lan Ting's possession before directly descending onto Damon's Star. Damon's star was unlike the other stars. It was an entire 10 or more times bigger than the other stars, and it was comparable to a large world. Moreover, it was filled with an indescribable aura of battle. No matter if it was the mountains or plains, everywhere was covered in ruins, severed rivers, ground that was split apart, collapsed mountains, and surging seas of lava. It seemed as if in the countless years of the past, this star that was covered in desolation had experienced numerous wars, and it was even to the extent that expanses of corpses could be seen being exposed in the air. What a dense aura of slaughter! Xianxia descended onto a barren mountain peak, and he instantly sensed an aura of slaughter assault his face. It was the aura of war that couldn't be illuminated by the passage of time, and if it was any other person who'd arrived here, that person would probably be unable to help but feel terrified from this aura before that person's mind would directly collapse. However, this little bit of the aura of slaughter was utterly unable to affect Xianxia. Xianxia's gaze inadvertently glanced to the side and suddenly noticed that there was an illusory bridge that connected the heavens and the earth extremely far away in the distance. It was like the most resplendent flowing light, and it illuminated the entire heavens and the earth. That's formed from the might of the spatial tide, and it's the door to enter the tomb. The master of the tomb utilized his supreme ability all those years ago to transform the spatial tide into his own. Unfortunately, he only had the time to set up this door in the end, and he used this to defend the place where his bones are buried. The tiny cauldron side. Xianxia gasped because the spatial tide was no joke. It was converged into form from the most chaotic temporal and spatial energies, and even existences at the Immortal King realm wouldn't dare say that they could easily gather such energy. As for experts at the other realms of cultivation, they would absolutely perish upon being swept into a spatial tide. Yet the master of this tomb had actually made use of the might of the spatial tide for himself, and it obviously showed exactly how terrifying his strength was at that time. Wait, why didn't he flee and chose this place to bury himself instead? Could it be that he knew he was going to die, so he created a tomb for himself? After that, Xianxia realized a problem and exclaimed with shock. Yes, he didn't have the time to flee this place at that time. The tiny cauldron said, even though this nightmare battlefield is a medium-sized battlefield now, many great figures had fought intensely with the Xeno race here during the primeval times. Unfortunately, even though he killed all the Xeno race experts in the end, the master of the tomb lost all his quintessence energy. When it spoke up to hear, the tiny cauldron's voice was slightly low and seemed to be unwilling to mention the past. It changed the topic and guided Xianxia. In the countless years after that, many experts of the three dimensions had once tried to step through that door. However, practically all of them returned empty-handed. But I don't dare confirm that no one has entered into it until now. After all, I haven't come here for a very long time either. Xianxia instantly realized that the tiny cauldron had come here once in the past. Come, let's go ahead and take a look, the tiny cauldron instructed. Xianxia nodded before his figure flashed towards the distance. As he flew, Xianxia observed the surroundings with concentration. To his surprise, he actually noticed that many formidable auras were gathered on Damon's star now. However, these auras were mostly at the golden immortal realm. This discovery caused Xianxia's heart to sink because he faintly felt that they'd probably come for the sake of the tomb of the great figure behind the spatial tide. I never expected that a simple inner court exam would actually become a competition for fortune. Looks like there's definitely deep meaning behind the reason why the Academy arranged for the inner court exam to be held here. Xianxia pondered deeply before he suddenly realized that he'd underestimated the inner court exam this time. If it wasn't for the guidance of the tiny cauldron, he would have even missed the struggle to obtain fortune here. He was very clearly aware that this was because the information he possessed was too little. He wasn't like the disciples of those top powers that were able to obtain the guidance of the powers behind them no matter where they went. Rumble. Right at this moment, a wave of rumbling fluctuations of battle swept over from afar, and it swept towards the surroundings with a mighty impetus. Xianxia instantly stopped moving before the vertical eye between his brows opened up, and then it swiftly swept over. After a short moment, when he saw the situation in the distant battlefield clearly, A wisp of a strange smile instantly suffused the corners of his mouth as he muttered, "It really is the will of the gods." Swoosh! In the next moment, his figure flashed and vanished into thin air. This was a boundless gorge that was covered densely in ravines, and it was entirely barren. Yet at this moment, there were a few figures in intense battle with over 10 xenorace experts. The situation of the battle was extremely intense, and they flattened numerous mountains. Shockingly, the person in the lead of those figures was Wuxia. At this moment, he was commanding the others in battle, and he said in a stern voice, "This group of idiots wishfully desire to ambush and crush us. Kill! Kill all of these bastards!" His voice reverberated through the 9 heavens. Kill! The spirits of Wuxia's companions were refreshed, and they brought forth their entire cultivations and actually utterly suppressed those 10+ golden immortal realm xenorace experts. This obviously showed that Wuxia and his companions deserved to be ranked in the top 50 of the all-heaven golden rankings. Heh! I never expected that we would actually be able to kill a few targets on the way. It can be considered to be an unexpected gain. Bastards! Die for you, Grandad! A disciple from the Wuxia clan roared with laughter as the saber in his hand shook, and it transformed into a jet-black glow that covered the sky before fiercely smashing onto that xenorace expert. This strike was rather ruthless and overbearing, and it directly sealed off this xenorace expert's path of retreat. It was obvious that when this strike descended, the xenorace expert would definitely be slashed apart. However, right at this moment, swoosh! A shapeless strand of sword chi spread out from space, and it was shapeless and traceless as it easily annihilated the golden immortal realm xenorace expert before the jet-black saber glow descended. Pooh! Fresh blood sprayed into the surroundings and onto the entire body of that disciple from the Wuxia clan. Yet he seemed like a rabbit that had its tail stomped on. He stomped his feet with rage and roared, "Who is it? Which bastard stole my prey?" This explosive shout instantly drew the attention of Wuxia and the others, and they successively swept their gazes throughout the vicinity. "What is it? Someone is seizing our prey. Damn it! Who is it? Get the fuck out here!" The expressions of Wuxia and the others instantly turned gloomy. Never had they imagined that there would actually be someone who had the courage to seize their prey at this critical moment. Unfortunately, before they could search for the traces of their enemy, they were entangled once more by those 10+ xenorace experts because of the short gap in attacks, and they were unable to struggle free. "Let's deal with these bastards first," Wuxia immediately decided and gnashed his teeth as he shouted explosively. The others could only agree to his decision, and they vented the flames of rage in their hearts onto these xenorace experts. Swish! When a disciple of the Wuxia clan was about to kill a xenorace expert that had fallen deeply into a hopeless situation, another shapeless strand of sword chi flashed into appearance, and it killed the xenorace expert before the disciple from the Wuxia clan. These sort of attacks that waited for the proper opportunity before they were executed, and this grasp of the perfect time had simply attained a peak state. It wasn't too early or too late, it was just at the right time, and if this scene was seen by others, they would definitely clap and sigh with praise. But all of this caused that disciple from the Wuxia clan to be infuriated to the point of almost spitting blood. This prey that he'd worked hard to obtain was about to be annihilated before him when it was seized by another, and that sort of feeling was utterly distressing. Damn it! Who exactly is it? Which damnable bastard is causing trouble? Damn it! My fucking prey! At this moment, there was actually more than one voice that resounded at the same time, and they reverberated throughout the surroundings. After that, they glanced at each other and realized that the xenorace experts they were dealing with had actually been killed by another at the same time. Instantly, their expressions became extremely unsightly, and when they glanced once more towards their opponents, they noticed that only a single golden immortal realm xenorace expert was left. Damn it! Wuxia's voice seemed as if it was squeezed out from the cracks between his teeth, and it revealed bone-piercing coldness. He was infuriated in his heart, and he suddenly slapped his hand fiercely towards the last xenorace expert present here. However, right at this moment, the shapeless strand of sword chi surged into appearance once more, and it flashed lightly before severing the head of the xenorace expert before Zhuoqiujun's attack could descend. Pooh! Fresh blood sprayed into the surroundings, and the scene was tragic, beautiful, and bloody. However, Zhuoqiujun's entire face had flushed red instead. His nerves had bulged while his entire body was shivering with rage. Those were an entire 14 xenorace experts at the Golden Immortal realm, yet they'd actually been seized away right under his nose. The expressions of the others were gloomy to the extreme as well. They gnashed their teeth to the point it emanated cracking sounds, and they almost exploded with rage. Sorry, I thought those xenorace experts didn't belong to anyone. See you later. I hope I'll have the chance to see all of you again. Right at this moment, a light and indifferent voice slowly resounded. After that, Zhuoqiujun and the others noticed that a tall figure was waving at them from extremely far away, and his face even revealed a warm smile. But when his voice entered into their ears, it was so ear-piercing, and when his smile entered into their eyes, it was like the greatest ridicule in the world that caused their eyes to turn red. Chen Shi! You damnable bastard! I won't forgive you. Just you wait. Zhuoqiujun suddenly roared towards the sky, while he revealed an extremely savage expression. Zhuoqiujun's roar was still reverberating when Chen Shi's figure had already vanished a long time ago. That damnable bastard! It won't be long before you'll be dead. Zhuoqiujun gasped heavily for breath while his expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He knew that Chen Shi was taking revenge on them, yet he'd never imagined that being taken advantage of was actually so infuriating. Brother Jun, what should we do next? A young man couldn't help but ask. I'm truly unable to swallow this grievance. Why don't we pursue that kid and taking advantage of him while he's hunting and killing xenorace experts? As soon as these words were spoken, it instantly obtained the agreement of everyone else, and they nodded successively without end. No, Zhuoqiujun was stunned, and then he instantly calmed down and said with a flickering gaze, "Let me ask all of you, did all of you notice how that kid attacked?" All of them gazed at each other, and then they fell into deep contemplation. As they recalled the scenes from before, they couldn't help but reveal a wisp of shock and extreme terror. Yes, they actually weren't able to discern exactly how Chen Shi had attacked. Do all of you understand now? That kid is absolutely not a weakling, on the contrary, he's extremely dangerous. If he was attacking us earlier, then the outcome would probably truly be difficult to determine. Zhuoqiujun took a deep breath and sighed with emotion. He wouldn't have grasped the spatial grand Tao, right? One of them spoke with surprise and bewilderment. Absolutely impossible. As soon as these words were spoken, it suffered the objection of all the others. What a joke! The spatial grand Tao was one of the 3 supreme laws that only existences at the Immortal King realm could comprehend. So how could it possibly be grasped by a golden immortal? It's possible as well. Don't forget that the divine crest bestowed to Yun Fuxing all those years ago was the shadow of time, and it was a branch of the temporal grand Tao. Zhuoqiujun's brows knit together as he pondered deeply for a moment and said, "Perhaps Chen Shi has grasped a branch of the spatial grand Tao. But it's weird because I clearly remember that he obtained the 5-element divine crest when he advanced into the golden immortal realm. The others were unable to wrap their heads around it no matter how they racked their heads as well. Forget it. Let's endure this matter for now. It won't be long before there'll naturally be someone who'll deal with that kid. The important matter at hand is to head towards that immortal king's tomb as soon as possible." Zhuoqiujun waved his hand and directly instructed them. The immortal king's tomb. When this was mentioned, the gazes of the others shot towards the distance in unison. Over there was an illusory bridge that connected the heavens and the earth, and it was brilliant and radiant while it emanated an extremely enticing glow. Swoosh! In the sky above a winding and broken river, space shook before a tall figure walked out from within it. Unfortunately, even though I seized 14 golden immortal realm xenorace experts from them, I wasn't able to gather the materials in their possession. Chen Shi smacked his lips and thought with slight regret. He was hidden extremely far in the distance earlier, and he'd utilized the Sword of Space's Shadow Flash to seize the 14 xenorace experts from Zhuoqiujun and the others, and it could be considered to have vented the grievance in his heart. Move quickly, you must arrive before the spatial tide before night arrives. Otherwise, once night arrived, this entire daemon star will fall into a violent state, and it would be impossible to even approach it by a step. The tiny cauldron spoke abruptly and warned Xianxia. Xianxia was shocked in his heart, and then he looked up into the sky. It was already dusk, and there was less than the time for an incense stick to burn before night descended. He didn't dare hesitate any longer and immediately rushed over at full speed. All along the way, he didn't encounter any other unexpected events, and coupled with Xianxia was teleporting, he approached the spatial tide in almost 10 minutes. As he grew closer to the spatial tide that connected the heavens and the earth, Xianxia felt even more shocked in his heart. The spatial tide was like an arched bridge that lay across the heavens and the earth, and it was suffused with dazzling radiance. He was able to clearly notice that the scene around the spatial tide was changing swiftly. Winter left and spring arrived, and the 4 seasons interchanged. The plants grew and withered while the tide rose and fell, and it was actually completed in a short period of time and repeated continuously. It felt as if he was observing time moving swiftly. In an instant, years had been passed, and it caused others to feel a wisp of indescribable shock. It was the might of time, because the supreme laws of time and space were gathered together to form this place. The only difference was that the spatial tide's might was extremely chaotic and violent. Once those below the immortal king realm were to come into contact with it, they would instantly transform into ash. I wonder how many people in the 3 dimensions are able to grasp the profundities of time and space. After he arrived here, Xianxia slowed down and observed the surrounding environment as he sighed with emotion in his heart. The stronger one's strength became, the clearer one would notice that one still had a long way to go. But in next to no time, Xianxia couldn't be bothered to sigh with emotion because he noticed to his shock that there were already numerous figures standing before the door formed by the spatial tide. And there were actually no less than 100 people. It was even to the extent that Xianxia saw to his surprise that Zhao Mingli, Ji Xianbing, and Jin Lu were standing amongst this crowd of people. Many students from all 7 of the great academies seemed to have come. Xianxia's gaze swept the crowd and distinguished the identities of these people. Surprisingly, they were the students of the 7 great academies that were participating in the exam, but not all of them had come here. After all, each of the 7 great academies had sent out 50 students, and they formed a total of 350 students, whereas there were only a little over 100 students standing here. This is really going to be slightly troublesome. Xianxia frowned. The more people were here, the greater the competition would become, whereas even though such a place where fortune resided seemed like everyone had to depend on their own luck to obtain it, none of them would hold back when it truly came to fighting for the treasures. He wasn't afraid of the students from Dao Emperor Academy making a move against him, and he was mostly worried about the students from the other 6 academies instead. After all, according to the rules that Zhou Zhili announced, they were only ordered not to fight against their peers from the academy, but there were no rules that prohibited them from fighting the students of other academies. Xianxia, you've actually come as well. Quickly come over here. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly sounded out from afar. Xianxia raised his eyes and looked over, and he saw Ji Xianbing was waving his hand towards him. This caused Xianxia to be unable to help but be shocked. He'd never imagined that Ji Xianbing's senses would be so acute, because he'd concealed his tracks yet was still noticed by Ji Xianbing. Ji Xianbing's voice drew the attention of many people, and they shot their gazes over in succession. It really is Xianxia. I never expected that he would be able to arrive here. Oh, this isn't bad as well. With Xianxia joining us, our certainty of being able to head into the Immortal King's tomb will be slightly greater. Amidst the sound of these discussion, Xianxia walked over there, and he nodded in greeting to all the students from Dao Emperor Academy. Meanwhile, Xianxia noticed that a total of 16 students from Dao Emperor Academy had arrived here, and besides Ji Xianbing, Zhao Mingli, and Jin Lu, all the others were senior students. Amongst those senior students was Ao Zhanbei that was ranked at the 1st position on the All-Heaven Golden Rankings, Ji Wanlei that was ranked at the 3rd, Du Sun who was ranked at the 5th. Practically all of them were existences at the top amongst the top 50 on the All-Heaven Golden Rankings. It could be said that amongst all of these people, Xianxia could be said to only be slightly familiar with Zhao Mingli and Ji Xianbing, and he'd never spoken a single word to all the others. Thus, there was naturally no relationship between them. However, Xianxia didn't care about all of this. He hadn't come here because he had to rely on their strengths, so he could stand firmly because he had no intention to lend their strength. Thus, he naturally didn't put on a very reserved display. On the other hand, those senior students had a variety of expressions when they saw Xianxia. Some were surprised, some vigilant, some seemed to be lost in thought, and some revealed a wisp of amiableness. As students of Dao Emperor Academy, they were naturally extremely familiar with everything related to Xianxia. However, most of them had never imagined that Xianxia would actually be able to arrive here. After all, they'd relied on the guidance from the powers that stood behind them to find out that such a place of fortune resided within the nightmare battlefield. Whereas, Xianxia was of ordinary origin yet was able to find this place. So it naturally caused them to feel surprised. Xianxia, I've cultivated a secret technique that allows me to sense some hidden things. Yet I never expected that I would inadvertently notice you. You won't blame me for exposing you, right? Meanwhile, Ji Xianbing had already come over and smiled apologetically at Xianxia. His sincere attitude won a good impression from Xianxia instead, and the trace of ill feelings in Xianxia's heart vanished without a trace. Xianxia immediately said with a smile, I intended to come over here in the first place, so how could I blame Brother Ji? All right, with you joining us, we might be able to obtain some fortune from within the tomb. Ji Xianbing smiled. Xianxia shook his head. Brother Ji, you think too highly of me. To be honest, I don't know anything about this tomb up until now. So I'm probably unable to be of much help and might be a burden for everyone instead. He was telling the truth. The tiny cauldron had only told him some vague information like this was the tomb of a great figure during the primeval times, yet the tiny cauldron had never told him the name of this tomb. Why are you so garrulous? If you want to benefit from the tomb, then we have to collaborate, otherwise this fortune will probably be seized by the joint forces of the others. Zhao Mingli walked over and glanced at Xianxia. She spoke in a straightforward manner as well and didn't conceal anything, causing the students of the other 6 academies to look over successively. At this moment, Xianxia finally understood that Ji Xianbing and the others were worried that the other 6 academies would join forces to go against them. So all of them students from Dao Emperor Academy had put down all the grievances between each other and joined forces. Humph! This fellow is someone that acts recklessly and in an unbridled manner. Just moments ago, he seized our prey. So aren't all of you afraid that he'll seize the opportunity to go against all of you if you collaborate with him? Right at this moment, a cold grunt sounded out from afar. Along with this voice, Wuxia's group flew over from afar. All of them had gloomy expressions as they stared at Xianxia with hostile gazes, and they seemed as if they wished for nothing more than to charge forward and take a few bites out of Xianxia. Originally, many students from the other 6 academies frowned upon noticing the appearance of Wuxia and the others, and they revealed a wisp of worry on their faces. However, when they heard what Wuxia said, all of them instantly heaved sighs of relief and seemed as if they were waiting to watch a show. The reason was extremely simple. There was obviously an internal conflict going on between the students of Dao Emperor Academy, and they were only too anxious for a situation like this to appear. Even though the students of the other 6 academies tried hard to maintain calm expressions, the trace of pleasure that was faintly revealed between their brows was still noticed by Ji Xianbing, Zhao Mingli, and the others. This caused all of them to frown, and they glanced at Wuxia's group with displeasure. As far as they were concerned, as the number 1 academy in the immortal dimension, even if there were numerous issues between the students of their academy, but when they were in the outside world, even if they couldn't work together, they should protect the reputation of the academy. On the other hand, the actions of Wuxia's group at this moment was obviously a bit bad. Wuxia's group remained indifferent towards all of this. All of their gazes locked onto Xianxia in succession while their expressions were gloomy, and they didn't conceal their hatred at all. The scenes from before were still vivid in their minds, so they were blazing with hatred when they saw Xianxia. If it wasn't out of consideration for the rule that prohibited fighting amongst students, they would have probably attacked Xianxia without the slightest hesitation. Ji Xianbing and the others were slightly curious when they saw such a scene. Exactly what sort of horrible deed had Xianxia committed to actually make Zhuoqiujun's group hate him to such an extent? However, even though they were curious in their hearts, Ji Xianbing still stood by Xianxi's side and said in a low voice via voice transmission, "Xianxia, be a bit more forgiving. We have to be united when exploring the tomb this time. If it's at an ordinary time, I would definitely choose to stand at your side even if it's a battle with Zhuoqiujun." Xianxia was very clearly aware of Ji Xuanbing's considerations. Amongst the students from Dao Emperor Academy who were present here, only Ji Xianbing, Zhao Mingli, Zhen Lu, and himself were new students, so they naturally had to rely on the strength of these senior students. Only in this way would they be able to go against the students from the other 6 academies, because the situation before them was extremely clear. For the sake of seizing the fortune within the tomb, the students of the other 6 academies had taken all of them who were students from Dao Emperor Academy to be their greatest rivals, so they joined forces a long time ago. Under such circumstances, for the sake of obtaining the greatest gains within the tomb, the best method was for all of these students from Dao Emperor Academy to form into a united whole. However, even if he was clearly aware of this, it didn't mean that Xianxia would accept it. Because he was able to arrive at this tomb because of the guidance of the tiny cauldron, and he wasn't invited here by anyone. In other words, if he didn't come over here by coincidence, Ji Xianbing and the others would definitely not find it difficult to make a move without him. Xianxia was clearly aware of all of this. Of course, he still had a very good impression of Ji Xianbing because it was very difficult for someone that was a direct line descendant of an ancient great clan like Ji Xianbing to place such importance on his attitude. Humph. What? All of you really intend to collaborate with this kid? If it's like this, then we won't agree to it. When he saw Ji Xianbing speaking with Xianxia via voice transmission, Zhuoqiujun immediately grunted coldly and spoke bluntly. What's the meaning of this? To the surprise of everyone, the first person to stand out and denounce Zhuoqiujun was actually Zhao Mingli. Her beautiful brows raised slightly while her noble and peerlessly beautiful face carried a trace of coldness. It's already at a time like this, yet you still don't know how to act? Is this the ability of you Zhuoqiu clan? These words were similarly extremely blunt, and it caused the expressions of Zhuoqiujun and the others to turn gloomy. All right, everyone, stop for a moment. Could it be that all of you want others to laugh at our Dao Emperor Academy? Ji Xianbing frowned while his body surged with an imperial aura. It caused his bearing to instantly change and transform into that of an emperor, and he carried a commanding, imposing aura. Everyone present here felt their hearts shake. They knew that Ji Xianbing was furious. However, every single word he spoke conformed with the attitude and thinking of most of the people present here, so no one interrupted him. Even Zhuoqiujun and the others laughed coldly and didn't speak any further. All the students from the other 6 academies were slightly disappointed when they saw this. At the same time, they aroused a trace of vigilance towards Ji Xianbing because this heir of an ancient imperial clan didn't have really brilliant ability. Yet his words and actions represented the intentions and interests of everyone. This wasn't something that an ordinary person could accomplish. I'm sorry, Brother Ji and Miss Zhao. I intend to act on my own this time. Xianxia, who'd maintained silence since the beginning, raised his head abruptly, and he glanced at Zhuoqiujun and the others before his gaze finally descended onto Ji Xianbing and Zhao Mingli. Everyone was stunned when these words were spoken. They'd never expected that Xianxia would actually refuse under such circumstances. After all, it was the tomb of an immortal king, and the secrets within it were unfathomable while the dangers in it were unknown. Could it be that he thinks he can leave it alive by himself? When he saw Ji Xianbing and Zhao Mingli still intended to say something, Xianxia immediately smiled and said before they could speak, "There's no need to persuade me any further. I'm not acting on impulse." Ji Xianbing frowned, yet he knew that he was unable to persuade Xianxia when he saw Xianxia had decided, so he could only shrug helplessly and sigh. You have to watch out for the students of Vast Sky Academy, Bitter Silence Academy, and Grand Desolation Academy. All those years ago, when Senior Yun Fuxing was still a student of the Inner Court, he'd once gone to their academies on his own and defeated all the experts of the same cultivation within their academies. None of them were a match for Senior Yun Fuxing, and it was precisely because of this that Senior Yun Fuxing became renowned throughout the world and stirred the entire immortal dimension. Even though Ji Xianbing didn't say anything openly, he still told Chen Shi some secrets via voice transmission. After this incident occurred, these three academies have always taken it to be a great humiliation, and even their students became extremely hostile towards our Dao Emperor Academy because of this. So you must be on guard against them so as to avoid suffering disaster at their hands. He went to the three academies by himself and made a clean sweep of all of them. When he found out about this, Chen Shi couldn't help but exclaim with admiration in his heart. Exactly how dazzling was Yun Fuxing all those years ago. I know you don't like to associate with the Zhuoqiu clan's disciples. Never mind, after we enter the tomb, we'll still be able to meet each other in the end. Meanwhile, Zhao Mingli spoke as well. She'd very directly perceived the reason for Chen Shi's refusal as the fault of Zhuoqiu Jun's group. However, she wasn't wrong. So Chen Shi just smiled and didn't give any explanation. Night is descending. The restrictions on the spatial tide are about to be activated. Right at this moment, someone spoke in a low voice. Swoosh! In the next moment, the gazes of everyone shot in succession towards the spatial tide that connected the heavens and the earth, and their expressions more or less carried a wisp of burning anticipation. This was a tomb of an immortal king that had been left here for countless years. In the countless years of the past, extraordinary figures had come here to seek fortune, yet practically all of them returned empty-handed in the end. The reason was that the energy of this spatial tide was extremely strange. It was filled with a natural restriction that caused those below the golden immortal realm to be unable to endure the pressure emanated by it at all, whereas those above the golden immortal realm would cause the restrictions to be unable to endure their might, so it would collapse and be destroyed in the end. So they were similarly unable to enter it. In other words, this spatial tide that protected the tomb could only be entered by experts at the golden immortal realm. Of course, this merely meant that one had a slight chance, and one had to have a certain amount of ability and strength to enter it smoothly. It was even to the extent that one even needed a certain amount of luck. At this moment, the veil of night assaulted the world and covered the sky. Within this darkness, the spatial tide that was in the shape of an arched bridge seemed to be even more brilliant, blazing, and suffused with a dazzling and illusory glow. They were able to clearly sense that the might of the spatial tide's violent state was gradually reducing, and it was going silent. In practically a short amount of time, everyone present here was able to sense that the lethal and terrifying pressure the spatial tide gave them had practically weakened by half. Right at this moment, a young man who wore green feathered clothes and a star-shaped crown in the direction of the other 6 academies swung his hand casually, and a yellow-skinned gourd flew up into the sky. This gourd was suffused with divine radiance as it expanded, and it transformed into a size of over 30 m in radius within an instant. It was like a small hill that emanated a terrifying and heavy aura of chaos. Sky-Earth Gourd! Someone exclaimed with surprise, as he'd recognized this ancient immortal treasure that had been passed down for countless years. This gourd was grown from the chaotic divine plant, Sky-Earth Vine. It bloomed every 8,000 years, formed a fruit every 9,000 years, and there wasn't any need to refine it at all. It was innately capable of being utilized as an immortal treasure, and it was precious and rare to the extreme. This is the treasure of Vast Sky Academy, and only Vast Sky Academy still has a Sky-Earth Vine planted within its grounds. Moreover, there's only a single chaotic divine plant in existence within the immortal dimension, and it has always been taken to be the ultimate treasure of the Academy. Ji Xianbing frowned as he explained to Chen Shi in a light voice. I never imagined that Vast Sky Academy would actually take such a risk and give this precious treasure to their students to utilize. Looks like they're determined to obtain the fortune within this tomb. Who's that? Chen Shi instantly paid attention when he heard it was a treasure of Vast Sky Academy. According to what Ji Xianbing said, the students of Vast Sky Academy, Bitter Silence Academy, and Grand Desolation Academy had always taken the students of Dao Emperor Academy as their enemies. Lu Chenchuan, the direct line heir of one of the top powers in Profound Path Continent, the Lu clan. At the same time, He's the #1 expert in Vast Sky Academy's outer court, and his cultivation is at the Brahma heaven level or the advanced stage of the golden immortal realm. Ji Xianbing spoke casually and with great familiarity. According to my knowledge, this fellow seems to be gentle and polite, yet he's actually someone that kills resolutely. You have to be careful if you encounter him after entering the tomb. Chun Shi nodded imperceptibly. Woo woo woo. Meanwhile, Le Chenchuan formed numerous profound divine seals, and then a strand of sky-earth chaotic chi surged out abruptly from the opening of the gourd. It rumbled as it surged into the spatial tide, and then it actually forcefully opened up a passageway. Fellow Taoists, my Vast Sky Academy will be heading in first. Lu Chenchuan spoke loudly in a clear voice before flying onto the sky-earth gourd with the students from Vast Sky Academy. After that, they transformed into a ray of light that charged into the spatial tide. Let's set out as well. In the next moment, the experts of the other 5 academies withdrew ancient immortal treasures in succession, and every single one of them possessed obscure and terrifying auras that were actually on par with the sky-earth gourd. For a time, the glow of treasures flowed through the sky and illuminated the heavens and the earth brilliantly. Chun Shi sighed with emotion in his heart when he saw this. This is what is called as resources and reserves. Normally, it's rare to see a single ancient immortal treasure, yet they can be seen casually now. This obviously shows that these 6 great academies live up to their reputations of being able to coexist with Tao Emperor Academy. Brother Ao, it's time to utilize the chaotic yin-yang diagram. Zhuoqiujun spoke abruptly to Ao Zhanbei that was ranked at the first position on the All-Heaven Golden rankings. The chaotic yin-yang diagram. Besides being slightly shocked from hearing this name, Chun Shi acutely noticed that Ji Xianbing, Zhao Mingli, and Zhenlu were stunned as well before their expressions became slightly gloomy. Could it be that they weren't aware of the existence of the chaotic yin-yang diagram before this? Chun Shi glanced at the other senior students and noticed most of them had maintained a calm expression, and they weren't surprised. They seemed as if they knew Ao Zhanbei had it since the beginning. "All right," said Ao Zhanbei. His figure was tall while the muscles on his body seemed as if they were made from gold. He was a direct line descendant of the Dragon Dimension's Golden True Dragon, and he'd always been silent since the beginning. Yet he'd become the center of attention at this moment. "Wait," Ji Xianbing said in a low voice. "The chaotic yin-yang diagram is one of the few precious treasures of the Academy. Why is it in your possession?" Instructor Taba Tianxi handed it over to me before we entered the nightmare battlefield. Ao Zhanbei seemed to have expected Ji Xianbing would ask this question since the beginning, and he answered casually. This answer caused Ji Xianbing, Zhao Mingli, and Zhenlu's faces to turn gloomy, and even Chun Shi frowned. "Why didn't we know about this?" Ji Xianbing questioned with a slightly infuriated voice. "Only one who's ranked at the first position on the All-Heaven Golden rankings can safeguard such a precious treasure. Moreover, don't you already know now?" Ao Zhanbei replied casually. "Then let me ask you, since Instructor Taba handed this treasure over to you, he definitely intended for you to lead us into the tomb with the help of this treasure so that we can explore it and obtain the fortune within it. Then why didn't you notify us?" Zhao Mingli spoke abruptly while her clear eyes were completely icy cold. "That's because we were worried that news of this would be exposed. After all, this chaotic yin-yang diagram is a precious treasure from the primeval times, so it's easier to avoid the covetous intentions of others if less people are aware of it." Zhuoqiujun interrupted and said, "All right, now all of you are clearly aware of it. It isn't really too late." "What an excuse!" Ji Xianbing was infuriated, and he felt as if he'd been deceived. "You actually dared to go against the intentions of the Academy. Could it be that you're unafraid of suffering punishment?" Instructor Taba didn't say that I had to tell this news to all of you. Ao Zhanbei's expression remained unchanged as he replied calmly. "Xianbing, calm your anger. I was aware of this matter as well. It wasn't that Brother Ao intentionally concealed this information. It was actually because the nightmare battlefield is filled with danger. So it's naturally better for less people to be aware that he's carrying such a precious treasure." Ji Wenlei, that was ranked at the 4th position on the All-Heaven Golden rankings, spoke as well. He was a senior student, yet was a clansman of the Ji clan at the same time. However, he was only a branch clan disciple, so his status couldn't compare to Ji Xianbing. Ji Xianbing grunted coldly as he swept Ji Wenlei with his gaze. Yet he didn't say anything in the end. On the other hand, Xianxia was watching coldly from the side, and he'd faintly guessed the course of events. Taba Tianxi had definitely known of the existence of this tomb since a long time ago, and that was why he'd given the chaotic yin-yang diagram to Ao Zhanbei to safeguard. The reason for this was so that Ao Zhanbei could lead the students of Dao Emperor Academy and rely on the treasure to break through the restrictions on the spatial tide, thus smoothly entering the Immortal King's tomb. However, Ao Zhanbei hadn't told many people about this. At the very least, Chen Shi, Ji Xianbing, Zhao Mingli, and Jin Lu were unaware. Perhaps Ao Zhanbei felt that the safety of the chaotic yin-yang diagram would be better guaranteed when less people knew about it, yet obviously no one would believe this. The reason behind Ao Zhanbei's actions were thought-provoking. Is he intentionally targeting the new students? Or does he have another objective? She was unable to figure it out, but at the very least, he'd perceived that Ao Zhanbei and Zhuo Qiujun were obviously in the same gang. Now, all of you understanding everything, and I won't be explaining any further. Let's set out right now. If we're delayed and allow the students of the other academies to seize the fortune within the tomb, then none of us will be able to obtain any benefits. Ao Zhanbei swept everyone with his gaze before he raised his hand and gestured. Swish! An ancient scroll unfolded in midair, and it was completely chaotic within it. It surged with the grand scenes of yin and yang fusing together. When looked at from afar, she felt a terrifying aura surge throughout his body, and it seemed as if his soul would be swept into it if he took another glance. Its aura is already so terrifying, then exactly how formidable would its might be? She hurriedly withdrew his gaze while his heart palpitated. He had a deeper feeling that the trip to the nightmare battlefield this time seemed to be for the inner court exam on the surface, yet it was probably for this Immortal King's tomb instead. Otherwise, how could the Academy possibly give such a precious treasure to a student? Shi, do you really not intend to come with us? Ji Xianbing turned around and asked Shi's opinion once more. Shi shook his head. Ji Xianbing didn't speak any further when he saw this, and then he cupped his hands. Heh! Zhuo Qiujun laughed coldly when he saw this, and then he glanced at Shi as if he was saying, "Let me see how you enter the tomb without the assistance of the chaotic yin-yang diagram. Let's go." Ao Zhanbei pointed towards the chaotic yin-yang diagram in midair, and then a strange fluctuation buzzed out from it and spread into the surroundings. After that, something flashed before Shi's eyes, and then only he alone remained here. The veil of the night was dark like ink, and the spatial tide was suffused with blazing light. Shi stood all alone before the door and pondered silently for a long time. In the end, he couldn't help but sigh as he felt the current situation was truly a bit complicated. However, when he thought about it carefully, the forces that had entered the tomb this time weren't complicated. They were roughly divided into two great groups, the Dao Emperor Academy and the other 6 academies. The reason Shi felt it was complicated was because there was friction and enmity between these students from Dao Emperor Academy. Each of them had their own intentions, so even if they really found a fortuitous encounter, they would probably not cooperate sincerely. Coupled with the students of the other 6 academies eyeing them with hostility and the unknown dangers that existed within the tomb, she was really extremely worried for Ji Xianbing and Zhao Mingli. However, even though they seemed to have joined forces, if those 6 great academies encounter a great fortuitous encounter, then it would probably be impossible to prevent some friction between them. So their situation isn't much different from the situation Ji Xianbing and the others are in. Fortunately, I didn't participate in it. I seem to be all alone, but with the help of the tiny cauldron, I'll at least be able to avoid a great deal of danger. She took a deep breath and discarded all the distracting thoughts in his mind before thinking no further. "Senior, should we set out?" asked Shi. "Wait a while longer." The tiny cauldron seemed to have thought of something and suddenly guided him. "Search carefully if there's an indigo blue flower with 9 leaves and shaped like a shuttle in the surroundings of this spatial tide entrance." Shi was stunned. Even though he didn't know what the tiny cauldron intended to do, He still acted according to the tiny cauldron's instructions and released his immortal sense to search for it. With the current strength of his soul, he'd practically instantly searched an area of 5,000 kilometers in the surroundings. Yet he didn't notice the flower that the tiny cauldron mentioned. Don't use your immortal sense. This flower is called Heaven Dance. It's a rare and precious flower from the primeval times that only blooms in the vicinity of a spatial tide. It's extremely intelligent, allowing it to be able to avoid the detection of any immortal sense. Even the will of an immortal king is unable to detect it. The tiny cauldron explained swiftly. Heaven Dance. She had never imagined that such a strange flower would exist in the world. He immediately withdrew his immortal sense, and then the eye of divine truth silently surged out into appearance between his brows before it swiftly swept the surroundings. Sure enough, he noticed a heaven dance flower after a short moment. It was growing nearby the spatial tide entrance, and it was thumb-sized, completely translucent, and suffused with an indigo blue glow. Because the glow emanated by the spatial tide was too dazzling and blazing, it had been completely concealed, and if it wasn't for the detection of the eye of divine truth, it would truly be difficult to notice this flower. Senior, what effects does this flower possess? Xianxia's spirits were refreshed. You'll know once you enter the tomb. The tiny cauldron said, remember, utilize the cage etching technique I taught you when gathering it, because only in this way will you be able to capture it. If you execute any other technique, then it will perish instantly. That would make it completely useless. Xianxia nodded. He immediately walked forward and waved his hand casually, and he formed a profound and unfathomable technique that directly enveloped the heaven dance flower before it descended into his palm. In practically an instant, a wispy fragrance that gladdened the soul entered into Xianxia's nose. Even with his cultivation in the Tao heart, he wasn't able to restrain his heart from swaying. It felt as if he was floating amongst the clouds, and he truly wished for nothing more than to fall asleep and never wake up. After that, Xianxia suddenly returned to his senses and said in his heart, amazing! Even though I don't know the exact use of this flower, merely this hypnotizing fragrance is sufficient to arouse fear in the hearts of all. Unfortunately, this flower must be confined with the cage etching technique. If it wasn't for this, I can utilize it to launch sneak attacks on my enemies. Xianxia looked at it for a short moment before he put the flower away. Subsequently, he successively gathered over 10 heaven dance flowers from the vicinity of the spatial tide, and he only stopped after this because he couldn't find any more. Over 10 of them, it's more or less sufficient. Get ready. I'll take you in right now. The tiny cauldron pondered deeply before it suddenly soared into the sky, and its round and clear surface emanated a strand of gray and hazy primeval chi that directly enveloped Xianxia's entire body. Swoosh! In the next moment, the tiny cauldron transformed into a wisp of lightning that swiftly bore its way into the spatial tide. To Xianxia's surprise, from the beginning until the end, the restrictions of the spatial tide weren't activated at all, and it even moved aside like tidewater to open up a path for the tiny cauldron. Xianxia hadn't figured out how the tiny cauldron accomplished this when he felt the scene before his eyes flash. And then his field of vision was covered in chaos and darkness before he was unable to see anything clearly. After an unknown period of time, when Xianxia's vision recovered its clarity, he noticed that he had actually appeared within a dark and quiet passageway. This place was covered in deathly silence and was utterly devoid of vitality. The walls were mottled, and it was suffused with an ancient aura that assaulted the face. As he stood here, Xianxia was able to clearly sense a shapeless force that pressed down onto his heart, yet he didn't know where it came from. Thus, it seemed to be mysterious and terrifying. Could it be that this is the immortal king's tomb of legend where extraordinary fortune is buried? Xianxia glanced at the surroundings while a wisp of anticipation couldn't help but arise in his heart. The passageway was deep and quiet, and it was suffused with a shapeless pressure that struck the heart. This was the immortal king's tomb that had been here since the primeval times, and it had experienced the passage of countless years. Even with Xianxia's cultivation at the golden immortal realm, he still felt a wave of indescribable pressure as he stood here. He didn't dare be careless. He executed the eye of divine truth, causing a profound talisman marking to surge into appearance on the vertical eye between his brows, and it sparkled brilliantly as he looked towards the depths of the dark passageway. Suddenly, Xianxia let out a muffled groan, while he felt a piercing pain from the vertical eye between his brows. It was completely crimson-red like fire, while the image of a sea of blood and lava was reflected within its pupils, and it almost incinerated his eye of divine truth. At this moment, within his field of vision, this passageway's appearance had changed completely. It was covered in a sea of blood that roared and surged like dense lava, and it was suffused with terrifying killing intent that caused an extremely sharp pain to come from his eye of divine truth. Xianxia's heart went cold. What a terrifying energy of blood that hasn't been worn away after a myriad of years. The ancient killing intent contained within it is still so terrifying and horrifying. Even the eye of divine truth was almost destroyed by this killing intent. As expected, many people have coveted this place since the countless years of the past. Unfortunately, none of them had the luck to walk out of this place, and they were finally buried here. The tiny cauldron sighed with emotion and spoke with an indifferent tone. Senior, the terrifying blood that fills this place was left behind by the experts that entered this place? Xianxia was surprised. Yes, this passageway is called the impermanent path. It's filled with the supreme energy of life and death, and it's set up in the arrangement of providing only a slim chance for survival. If one isn't able to find the only safe path, then one will fall into a great tribulation of life and death before perishing here. The tiny cauldron explained in a light voice. The energy of life and death was one of the 3 supreme laws that could only be comprehended by immortal king realm experts. When he heard this, Xianxia was even more confident that the master of this tomb that the tiny cauldron spoke of was at least at the immortal king realm. Otherwise, it would be utterly impossible to control the supreme law of life and death. Senior, where's that one and only safe path? Xianxia couldn't refrain himself from asking this question. The energy of blood that filled this place was too terrifying, and it caused even his eye of divine truth to be unable to perceive the true appearance of this passageway. This was the reason that he'd asked this question. The tiny cauldron went silent for a short moment before it said, "In the countless years of the past until now, the layout of this place has changed. Coupled with the fact that it has been too long, it's very difficult for me to give you an accurate answer." Xianxia was stunned, and then a slightly bad premonition suddenly arose in his heart. "However, I suggest that you should make a move immediately. Don't stay at a single place for too long." The tiny cauldron said, "The laws of life and death are the most variable. Standing still without moving is the stupidest thing to do." Xianxia was shocked once more in his heart, and he laughed bitterly without end. However, it was precisely because of what the tiny cauldron said that he stopped putting his hope on luck, and he started to carefully deal with the situation before him. Clang! After pondered deeply for a moment, Xianxia withdrew Starclasp and moved carefully ahead. This passageway only led in 2 directions, and he naturally wouldn't choose to turn back. In next to no time, he saw a corpse that sat at the side of the passageway. The clothes on the entire corpse was in rags, and half the corpse was clear like a precious gem while the other half was pitch black like charcoal. Xianxia was shocked in his heart. Since this corpse seems like a precious gem, it absolutely belonged to an extremely formidable existence. Yet in the end, this existence had sat down at the side of this impermanent path and perished. In the next moment, he noticed a palm-sized ancient jade pendant at the side of the corpse. However, as soon as his fingers touched it, a wave of rustling resounded before it transformed into powder and vanished. There's no need to continue searching. There's bound to be no treasures within this impermanent path. The living leave and the dead remain. Under the corrosion of the energy of life and death, treasures are naturally unable to remain intact. The tiny cauldron guided. Xianxia nodded, and his expression became even more serious as he continued forward. All along the way, he encountered many more corpses, and it was even to the extent that there were numerous bumps, holes, and dense marks of swords and blades on the passageway's wall. Obviously, it had suffered terrifying attacks. As he looked at the traces of battle that seemed to have been branded here from the annals of time, Xianxia's heart became even heavier. He was able to clearly sense that it contained shocking killing intent, and it was even to the extent that in his days, he seemed to be able to hear infuriated and disgruntled roars from the countless years of the past. All of this was definitely left behind by a peerless expert. Since the traces of battle left behind by them were capable of enduring the passage of countless years, it was very difficult to imagine exactly how formidable they were all those years ago. However, now they were all buried within this impermanent path. The might of the spatial tide entrance can only support the entrance of golden immortal realm experts. I wonder what sort of ability the owners of these corpses relied on all those years ago to forcefully make their way into here. Unfortunately, they were buried here in the end. If they knew this would happen, would they regret coming here? Xianxia took a deep breath before he discarded the distracting thoughts in his mind, and he stopped thinking and sighing with emotion about all of this. All of this only made him even more careful, and the nerves in his entire body were strained. However, all along the way, he actually didn't encounter any danger. Everything was so deathly silent, and only the shapeless pressure suffused the surroundings. After moving forward for around the time for an incense stick to burn, a wave of rustling and rapid noises suddenly entered Xianxia's ears, and then a wave of rumbling fluctuation spread over from the distant passageway. Xianxia was able to faintly sense the heavy aura of an immortal treasure being emanated. It's the aura of undying bats. These variant beasts are born within the energy of life and death, and unless you destroy this impermanent path, otherwise it's utterly impossible to kill them. Moreover, once you're tainted by the energy of life and death, it'll cause your lifespan, laws, cultivation, and even soul to suffer a heavy injury. The tiny cauldron spoke swiftly with a voice that didn't have much emotion, and it seemed as if the tiny cauldron had expected the appearance of such a scene. As soon as the tiny cauldron finished speaking, Xianxia noticed numerous palm-sized bats that were completely suffused with jet-black energy of death and moved swiftly like bolts of lightning, had suddenly appeared extremely far away in the passageway, and they'd formed a cloud of bats. They whistled through the passageway in a group, and they were like a flowing mist of the jet-black energy of death, and their mouths that were filled with sharp fangs emanated terrifying wails that were shrill like the cries of an infant. "Senior, do you have a way to deal with these beasts?" Xianxia frowned while his expression was extremely heavy. He was able to clearly sense that the aura of every single one of those undying bats weren't weaker than the golden immortal realm. This wasn't the most important point. The most important point was that they were condensed into form from the energy of death, so it was utterly impossible to kill them. They were extremely troublesome to deal with. "Go over." The tiny cauldron's answer was extremely simple. "Didn't you notice that there are people fighting and charging in the depths of the cloud of bats since a long time ago? I was wondering why the undying bats would be drawn over and become violent when I've concealed your aura since a long time ago. Now it would seem like it's definitely because of those little fellows." Xianxia was stunned. He never expected that the tiny cauldron had actually imperceptibly assisted him. After that, he couldn't be bothered about all of this because he'd already noticed that an enormous and ancient dark yellow gourd that was effused with divine radiance was within the dark expanse of undying bats, and it was emanating strand after strand of sky-earth chi while fighting intensely with the undying bats. The sky-earth gourd. Xianxia's eyes instantly narrowed when he saw this treasure. Sure enough, he noticed that all the students from Vast Sky Academy were surprisingly standing on the sky-earth gourd. The person in the lead was precisely the #1 expert in the outer court of Vast Sky Academy, Xianxia. What a coincidence! Xianxia said with emotion in his heart. Earlier, when they were before the tomb, Ji Shenbing had once said that Vast Sky Academy was just like Grand Desolation Academy and Bitter Silence Academy, and they had always taken Tao Emperor Academy to be their enemies. At that time, he'd even asked Ji Shenbing about Xianxia, yet he never expected that he would encounter Xianxia as soon as he entered the tomb. Damn it! If they didn't draw over these undying bats, then I wouldn't have to encounter any danger before smoothly passing through this place. Xianxia sighed in his heart. These undying bats can't be killed at all. Don't get entangled with them. Let's charge forward together. Xianxia's deep and loud shout resounded from afar. Kill! In the next moment, loud shouts resounded as thick and rumbling sky-earth chi sprayed out, and it smashed down like a lofty mountain while they pushed forward into the depths of the passageway. You must depart quickly as well. After these undying bats make an appearance, it won't be long before even more terrifying undying corpses appear. Those are formed from the corpses of the experts that perished here, and once they appear, it'll be impossible to leave this impermanent path. The tiny cauldron said swiftly, "My current strength has to be utilized when we arrive at the core area of this tomb. So if you encounter any danger now, you have to deal with it yourself. But don't worry, I've already utilized a secret technique to conceal your aura, so those undying monsters won't be able to notice you at all. You just have to be careful of the energy of death that suffuses the air." Undying corpses. Xianxia was shocked in his heart, especially when he recalled the meaning behind the tiny cauldron's words. He didn't dare dally, and his figure flashed as he utilized the wings of disruption and silently flashed towards the depths of the passageway. Swoosh! At this moment, the wings of disruption were suffused with a trace of the energy of the spatial laws, so it became even more agile and indistinct when utilized. It was utterly silent, and it didn't even cause a trace of fluctuation in space. The scene that occurred next was just as the tiny cauldron had said. Xianxia's figure had entered into the cloud of undying bats, yet he actually didn't draw their attention at all, so he naturally didn't suffer their fearless attacks that covered the heavens and the earth. It felt as if these undying bats had become blind. However, Xianxia didn't dare be careless. This passageway seemed to be broad, yet it was actually filled with the dense cloud of undying bats, and the space that he could use to move forward was extremely limited. Coupled with the fact that those undying bats were continuously attacking Lu Qianquan's group, it was unavoidable that the aftershock swept towards Xianxia, causing him to have no choice but to dodge repeatedly while deeply afraid of being tainted by even a trace of the energy of death. Swoosh! 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 When looked at from afar, Xianxia's figure was like a flickering shadow at this moment. He was flickering and teleporting through space, and he made a string of high-difficulty maneuvers that caused others to exclaim with shock while he safely avoided the assault of the various aftershocks from the battle. It was precisely because he had to dodge at all times and even had to avoid the energy of death that swept over sometimes that it caused his speed to slow down greatly instead. However, the tiny cauldron had concealed Xianxia's aura, but even though it could deceive the undying bats, it was completely useless against Lu Qianquan and the others. Thus, when Xianxia's figure was about to approach the Sky-Earth gourd, he was instantly noticed. "Hey, there's actually someone following us. It's him. It's that kid from Dao Emperor Academy." Even though they were amidst an intense battle, that voice still drew the attention of many people. Thus, in the next moment, all the students of Vast Sky Academy, including Lu Qianquan, noticed Xianxia. "It's actually this fellow. It's Xianxia." That students that took the first position amongst the new students that were just recruited into Dao Emperor Academy. "So, it's him." The expressions of Lu Qianquan and the others turned icy cold while their gazes flickered, and they revealed undisguised hostility. Since Yun Fuxing had gone to Vast Sky Academy by himself all those years ago and made a clean sweep of everyone from the same generation, it caused Vast Sky Academy to always think of this incident as a humiliation, whereas the students of the academy took the students of Dao Emperor Academy to be their enemies as well. This sort of hostility had never weakened over the years. Conversely, after so many years had passed, conflicts frequently erupted between the students of these two academies, but most of the conflict came to an end with the defeat of Vast Sky Academy. This caused the hatred between the students of the two academies to grow. Since these students entered Vast Sky Academy, they were influenced by this atmosphere of hatred and took the students of Dao Emperor Academy to be targets that they must defeat. They were carrying the mission to cleanse the humiliation of Vast Sky Academy on their shoulders. So even if there was no enmity between them and Xianxia, they instantly aroused boundless killing intent in their hearts upon confirming that Xianxia was a student of Dao Emperor Academy, and they seemed as if their eyes blazed with hatred from seeing an enemy. Could it be that these fellows want to fight me at a time like this? Xianxia glanced at them, and he couldn't help but laugh coldly in his heart when he saw the undisguised hatred they revealed. If they really were to act in this way, then he didn't mind giving them a painful lesson. After he heard what Ji Shenbing said, He was very clearly aware that Vast Sky Academy had always taken Dao Emperor Academy to be their enemy, whereas Dao Emperor Academy had never taken them seriously. In other words, all the instructors and students of Dao Emperor Academy felt that Vast Sky Academy didn't even have the qualifications to be their opponent. Screech! Screech! The undying bat's sharp cries that were ear-piercing like the scream of an infant resounded by their ears, while various attacks that contained the energy of death ceaselessly surged over from all directions. This scene caused Lu Chenchuan to suddenly calm down. "Don't get distracted. Let's get through this place first." Lu Chenchuan took a deep breath and moved his gaze away from Chen Shi before he instructed in a low voice. Even though the others were unwilling to let Chen Shi off, they were clearly aware that they were encircled by a cloud of undying bats right now, and if it wasn't for the assistance of the Sky-Earth Gourd, they would have probably perished a long time ago. This caused them to be utterly unable to send out anyone amongst them to deal with Chen Shi. Thus, in the next period of time, these students of Vast Sky Academy glared fiercely at Chen Shi before they concentrated on dealing with the undying bats. But in next to no time, they couldn't maintain their composure any longer because within their fields of vision, the undying bats actually didn't attack Chen Shi, and these undying bats solely pursued and assaulted their group. What the fuck is going on? Could it be that these animals are blind? There's clearly a living person moving about there. Yet why aren't they able to notice him? Damn it! Could it be that we've drawn the attention of those bats, allowing that kid to benefit from it? When he saw Chen Shi had actually charged out from the encirclement of the undying bats before them, one of them felt extremely disgruntled in his head and instantly spoke furiously. "It has to be like that. Without us resisting most of the attacks, how could he possibly be able to dodge them so easily? The students of Dao Emperor Academy are truly despicable. Damn it! We absolutely can't allow him to break free of the encirclement just like that." The others spoke successively while filled with righteous indignation, and their eyes seemed to blaze with flames. They'd fought with extreme difficulty, yet Chen Shi had moved through casually as if he was taking an idle stroll. When the two of them were compared, it instantly caused them to be disgruntled. Rumble! Right at this moment when they were slightly distracted, a cloud of undying bats suddenly transformed into a rumbling jet-black whirlwind that swept over, and it seized the opportunity when a young man from Vast Sky Academy's guard was lax to envelop him. Even though the young man quickly struggled free, yet the skin on his entire body was covered in a layer of pitch-black aura of death. He let out shrill cries of pain, and in an instant, even his face was covered by a wisp of strange and overbearing aura of death. It was clearly visible that his dense and jet-black hair had instantly turned white before withering and falling, whereas the skin and flesh on his body shriveled, collapsed and fell off, only leaving behind a terrifying pitch-black skeleton. Crack! The skeleton collapsed inch by inch before transforming into ash that dispersed along with the wind. All of this occurred in a very short moment of time, and the others weren't able to assist him in time even if they wanted to. They just watched as their companion instantly transformed into a pile of bones that was obliterated into ashes. That was a golden immortal. Yet he was gone just like that. This was the energy of death within the laws of life and death. It was extremely overbearing, and it was one of the supreme laws that only immortal kings could comprehend. Chen Shi gasped as well when he saw such a scene. He'd finally witnessed how terrifying the laws of life and death were. It decided life and death in an instant, and it was utterly merciless. At the same time, a strand of bone-piercing coldness couldn't help but suffuse the bodies of Lu Chenchuan and the others, and it felt as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. Under the stimulation of death, it caused the expressions of every single one of them to be extremely unsightly. It's that kid. It's that kid who caused Senior Brother Sun's death. If it wasn't because of him, how could Senior Brother Sun have been distracted and suffered such an end? One of them roared furiously. The eyes of the others were crimson red as well, and they stared furiously at Chen Shi. Chen Shi was speechless when he saw this. That fellow died from his carelessness. Yet all of you push the blame on me? All of you are really blindly making slanderous charges. He couldn't be bothered to make a fuss about it with them, and he placed all his attention onto breaking out of the tight encirclement because the tiny cauldron said that it wouldn't be long before undying corpses that were even more terrifying than undying bats would appear. If he didn't make the best use of his time to leave this place, then the consequences would be terrible. Bastard! Don't flee if you have the balls. Just you wait. No matter where you run to, I'll take your head to avenge senior brother's son. All the students of Vast Sky Academy were agitated when they saw Xianxia's actions, and their furious curses became even more merciless. Unfortunately, no matter how they cursed, they could only watch as Xianxia gradually moved further and further. Swish! After a short moment, Xianxia felt his entire body relax as he charged out of the dark mass of undying bats, and he'd arrived before an ancient bronze arched door. The bronze door was mottled and ancient, and its surface was even covered in green moss. But a strand of exuberant energy of life was contained within it, and the extremely ferocious cloud of undying bats were utterly unable to approach an area of 30 m around this bronze door. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and he said, "This is probably the safe path that the tiny cauldron spoke of." He turned around and took a glance behind him, and he could faintly see the sky-earth chi emanated from the sky-earth gourd within the cloud of undying bats that surged like tidewater. Obviously, Lu Qianquan and the others were still struggling bitterly. They weren't as fortunate as Xianxia, who had the assistance of the tiny cauldron. As soon as this cloud of undying bats were killed, the undying bats would be revived in an instant, and it was utterly impossible to annihilate the undying bats, causing the situation they were in to become extremely dangerous and arduous. Xianxia felt that if they didn't have the assistance of the ancient immortal treasure, the sky-earth gourds, they Lu Qianquan and the others would be utterly incapable of holding on until now. After that, he ceased thinking about this, and he raised his hand before pushing open the arched bronze door. Bang! Right at this moment, an abundant and terrifying shapeless force suddenly crushed down from behind Xianxia like an enormous mountain. Xianxia's eyes narrowed before he executed a backhand strike with his sword. The brilliant sword chi emanated from it was coiled with surging energies of the laws, and he'd already exerted his full strength. Because this sudden assault strength was similarly terrifying, and it caused Xianxia to feel extremely pressured. Bang! A terrifying airflow from the collision swept towards the surroundings like a gale before sweeping into the passageway. The terrifying force blasted Xianxia flying, and he smashed down onto the arched bronze door. With the formidable strength Xianxia possessed at this moment, he felt the vital blood in his entire body roil and seethe, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. They actually launched a surprise attack against me. What force is this? Why is it so terrifying? Xianxia turned around while his expression had become icy cold and indifferent to the extreme. And then he clearly saw a heavy aura of sky-earth chi effuse into the sky and was on the verge of vanishing. This allowed him to instantly understand where this attack came from, and it was definitely Lu Qianquan who'd utilized the might of the sky-earth gourd to launch a surprise attack against him. Sure enough, at practically the exact same time, Lu Qianquan's surprised voice resounded within the passageway. He actually resisted it? Damn it. The space between Xianxia's brows were instantly filled with a murderous expression, while his heart was covered in rage. His gaze was like an icy cold blade that gradually locked onto the distant Lu Qianquan and the others. At this moment, Lu Qianquan and the others had still not broken out of the tight encirclement. Yet according to Xianxia's estimation, it wouldn't be long before they would be able to arrive here smoothly. I originally intended to not make such a big fuss about it with all of you, yet you actually came looking for trouble with me and intend to cause harm to me. Even the heavens would probably be unsatisfied if I don't make all of you pay the price. Xianxia muttered in his heart while the killing intent in his chest surged like the tide. Leave quickly. I can sense the energy of the undying blood corpses is being converged. However, the tiny cauldron suddenly spoke a sentence that instantly caused Xianxia to calm down. He took a deep breath and withdrew his gaze before raising his head to look at the bronze door. He'd decided that even if Lu Qianquan and the others were to be fortunate enough to survive, he would definitely make them pay a painful price for this incident. Xianxia was suddenly stunned because he noticed that the thick layer of green moss on the surface of the bronze door had fallen off, and a character for Immortal? that was mottled with blood had appeared there. The strokes of the character were powerful and unrestrained, and it seemed as if it had been dragged out from an ocean of blood. Every single stroke was covered with dense blood, causing it to be a terrifying sight. With merely a single glance, Xianxia felt his soul shiver while strong nausea arose from within his chest. If it wasn't for the protection of the river diagram fragments within his sea of consciousness, he suspected that his mind and soul would be collapsed and destroyed at this moment. There's great terror in the moment between life and death. The tiny cauldron's voice suddenly resounded in the depths of his soul. This character was written with quintessence blood, and it was condensed with the laws of life and death. You must not take another look at it. This ancient character was actually written with the quintessence blood of the master of this tomb, and every single stroke on it was filled with the laws of life and death. When he heard what the tiny cauldron said, besides feeling astounded, Xianxia hurriedly withdrew his gaze and didn't dare take another glance at it. After that, the weak, restless, and nauseated feeling he had in his heart eased up greatly while his expression returned to normal. Senior, then how should we pass through this door? Xianxia frowned. He realized that the situation was slightly severe because the shapeless pressure within the impermanent path was growing stronger and stronger. At this moment, even he was able to sense that a force even more terrifying than undying bats was about to appear. Obviously, it was definitely the undying blood corpses. The tiny cauldron directly took action upon hearing this. Its jade-white body soared into the sky and emanated hazy glows of divinity that swiftly enveloped the bronze door, causing the bloody character to be covered by it. Under Xianxia's shocked gaze, the ancient character written in blood actually flew off from the bronze door and was absorbed into the tiny cauldron. This, Xianxia gasped as he never expected that the tiny cauldron would actually take the character away so easily. This character is the core force that maintains this place. Now that it has been taken by me, it won't be long before this impermanent path will be swept away by the spatial tide outside. What are you still standing here for? Leave. Quickly. The tiny cauldron's urgent voice resounded by Xianxia's ear. Swoosh! Xianxia didn't dare hesitate when he heard this, and he swiftly pushed open the door and vanished within it. Behind the bronze door was a boiling and surging river of lava. The river was around 300 m wide, and crimson red and blazing lava surged within it like roaring flame dragons. The blazing high temperature emanated by it caused space to distort, and numerous white clouds of mist rose into the air. Above the river was a bridge. The bridge was completely snow-white and actually seemed as if it was ground down from the bones of a beast. It lay across the river of lava, and it still remained in a perfect state after experiencing the heat from the river for countless years. As soon as Xianxia entered into the bronze door, he appeared at the banks of this river of lava. He stared at the surging lava and was able to clearly notice a strand of pure laws of fire enshrouding the heavens and the earth. The river of fiery refinement, the bridge to the deep. I never expected that I would be able to see them again in my lifetime. The tiny cauldron sighed faintly. Besides being stunned from hearing this, Xianxia instantly relaxed greatly. The tiny cauldron knew this place, so that meant that even if he encountered any danger, there would at least be a chance for him to deal with this danger. The thing that truly aroused surprise in his heart was the tiny cauldron's tone. It wasn't just rather familiar with this place, it had even come here in the past. This caused Xianxia to be even more certain that the tiny cauldron had a relationship that was beyond ordinary with the master of the tomb. Rumble. A wave of intense vibrations suddenly sounded out from within the bronze door behind him. It seemed as if something was collapsing and being destroyed, and amidst this noise was numerous frenzied sharp cries from undying bats and a wave of terrifying shouts. After that, a bang resounded as the bronze door actually collapsed completely. It was enveloped by a shapeless force and transformed into nothingness, and then all the noise vanished. Even if Xianxia searched with the eye of divine truth, he was actually unable to find a single trace of the bronze door. The impermanent path was destroyed just like that. Xianxia was stunned. A passageway that had experienced the passage of countless years, yet still remained, had been completely destroyed today because the tiny cauldron took away a character. It was truly shocking. Destruction and creation have always been the Heaven Dao's circulation pattern, said the tiny cauldron. Xianxia smiled. I was just feeling slightly regretful that those fellows from Vast Sky Academy vanished along with it. The tiny cauldron shook from side to side instead and said, that might not necessarily be the case. The impermanent path is filled with variables, and it's the path towards this tomb that's filled with the most variables. They possess the Sky-Earth Gourd, so perhaps they'll be able to escape this disaster. Xianxia was stunned, and then his brows raised as he said, that's good as well. I was just feeling worried about how I would make them pay for the incident before this. Swish! Swish! Suddenly, an expanse of lava waves arose from the nearby river of fiery refinement, and the waves actually contained numerous fishes jumping about in it before instantly vanishing within the river. But Xianxia had still clearly noticed that those fishes were completely bright red while the top of their heads were gold. Their tails were covered in a layer of gorgeous and illusory scales that were extraordinary and beautiful, and he actually didn't know what type of fish these were. These are yin-yang fish. They're a form of primeval variant fish. Those with extreme yin are born within the primordial darkness, and those with extreme yang are born within the primordial light. According to legend, the rare Grand Tao of Tai Chi was formed from a trace of the Tao striations within the bodies of these yin-yang fish. The tiny cauldron spoke with a tone that actually revealed blazing desire. These are top rare treasures in the 3 dimensions, and it's very difficult to find them in the outside world. Most importantly, they're born during the primordial times, so the death of every single one meant there was one less in the world. It's utterly impossible for them to multiply in number. Yin-yang fish, primeval variants. They possess Tao striations related to the Grand Tao of Tai Chi. When these extremely enticing words entered into Xianxia's ears, it caused his eyes to instantly brighten, and he couldn't restrain the excitement in his heart as he said swiftly, Senior, what effects do these yin-yang fish have? The tiny cauldron's mood seemed to be really not bad when it saw that it could still find yin-yang fish within the river of fiery refinement, and it said, it has too many uses like pill refinement, equipment refinement, comprehending the Grand Tao, tempering the immortal body, strengthening the soul. Oh, in short, it's enough for you to understand that its entire body is a treasure. Xianxia's eyes became even brighter when he heard this. He'd just experienced the dangers of the impermanent path, so being able to encounter such great fortune really conformed to the saying, where there's disaster, there's fortune. Senior, since it's like this, then these yin-yang fish are probably very difficult to capture, right? Xianxia glanced at the blazing river of fiery refinement and calmed down greatly. To others, it's as difficult as ascending the heavens because these fish are extremely intelligent. Once they detect danger, the vitality within their bodies will transform from life to death, and they would rather kill themselves than allow others to have them. So no matter how extraordinary one was, it's impossible to stop such a thing from occurring. The tiny cauldron said swiftly, however, it's extremely easy to us. Remember the heaven dance I asked you to gather. This flower is capable of soundlessly causing the yin-yang fish to become dazed for 10 minutes, and this period of time is sufficient to capture them. When it spoke up to hear, the tiny cauldron seemed to already be slightly impatient. Heaven dance flower. Xianxia's spirits were refreshed. He'd never expected that the tiny cauldron had asked him to gather these flowers before entering the tomb for the sake of dealing with these yin-yang fishes. When he thought about how amongst all the people that had entered the tomb this time, only he had gathered the heaven dance flowers, Xianxia was even more certain that agreeing to bring the tiny cauldron along this time was an extremely right choice. Having a senior is like having a treasure. Swoosh! Xianxia stopped hesitating and flashed onto the bridge. As he stood here, he was able to clearly sense exactly how terrifying the temperature of the river was. It forced him to the point of having no choice but to circulate his entire cultivation in order to avoid being burned and injured. Moreover, the river wasn't calm, and waves of fire that rose up to around 3 kilometers frequently appeared. These waves easily incinerated the space around it and caused Xianxia to shudder with fear. Fortunately, the bridge to the deep was created from the skeleton of a beast that actually innately possesses a shapeless force field, and it completely kept the waves of fire out. You just have to throw the heaven dance flower into the river, and then prepare to fish up the yin-yang fish. Remember that even if you're unable to obtain the yin-yang fish, don't rashly enter the river, otherwise, even I'll be unable to save you. The tiny cauldron warned Xianxia. It said the river of fiery refinement had secrets of its own within it, so once he came into contact with it, unless an expert at the Immortal King realm came to his rescue, otherwise, he would be instantly refined and die on the spot. Xianxia took a deep breath and worked hard to make himself calm down completely before he withdrew the 10+ heaven dance flowers and threw them into the river beneath the bridge. These heaven dance flowers were only thumb size and extremely graceful. After they entered into the river, they were like sand that fell into the ocean and were completely inconspicuous. But in next to no time, Xianxia noticed that an aura which was impossible to conceal effused out on the surface of the river, and it seemed as if it could seep into the depths of one's soul and bring out the deepest recollections and memories in one's heart. It caused others to be dazed, lost, and immersed within it before forever being unable to extricate oneself from it. How lucky! Xianxia knew about the heaven dance flower's ability since a long time ago, so when he noticed this aura effusing out, he instantly sealed up his 6 senses and entrusted his soul to the river diagram fragments. Sure enough, he wasn't affected at all while like this. Swish! Swish! In merely a short moment, a string of waves arose from the river of lava beneath the bridge. Under the focused gaze of the eye of divine truth, Xianxia was able to clearly notice that numerous bright red, exquisite, and gorgeous fishes were surging over from all directions. It felt as if they'd been drawn by a shapeless force, and over 10 fishes had quickly converged together. Xianxia's eyes grew even brighter when he saw this scene, and he didn't dare be careless in the slightest. The vital energy in his body accumulated as he awaited the moment to make a move. Gradually, a group of yin-yang fish had gathered beneath the bridge. Their tails that were covered in illusory and gorgeous scales swayed amidst the waves of fire, and they emanated an enticing and misty glow. Wait a while longer. Right when Xianxia intended to catch them all in one swoop, the tiny cauldron suddenly stopped him via voice transmission and said, "Once the amount of yin-yang fish arrives at more than 9, then a yin-yang fish king definitely exists amongst them. So it won't be too late to make a move once it's drawn out. At that time, I'll deal with the yin-yang fish king, and you only have to fish up those yin-yang fish." Yin-yang fish king. Xianxia was extremely shocked in his heart, and he gasped. He finally understood that the tiny cauldron's target wasn't these yin-yang fish, and it was their king instead. Rumble. Before long, a fish tail suddenly stretched out from the distant river of lava. The tail was over 3 m long and covered in extremely gorgeous and resplendent scales. With a light swing of the tail, it caused numerous waves of fire to shoot into the sky, and these tempestuous waves surged in the sky with an extremely mighty impetus. Xianxia could faintly see that a figure with a brilliantly golden head was swimming over at an extremely shocking speed from beneath the surface of the river, and it smashed through the myriad of waves of fire before it. The waves of fire were split apart and surged to the side, and they revealed the backbone of a large bright red fish. Even though its true appearance hadn't been revealed, yet an extremely terrifying aura swept out from it. Its aura was vast and perfect. It seemed like yin and yang had been fused and could crush the world. It was definitely the yin-yang fish king because only it was capable of possessing such a monstrous aura. It was utterly not something an existence at the golden immortal realm could compare to. Grup! A strange whistling sound erupted and caused layer upon layer of fiery waves of lava to arise. It seemed as if a rain of fire was about to shoot into the sky. However, a large fish that was 6 m long, completely covered in dense bright red scales, had a golden and brilliant head, and had a tail that was covered in dazzling scales suddenly charged out from the surface of the river and instantly arrived beneath the bridge. At that instant, Xianxia's heart twitched fiercely while he was shocked to the point of flashing backwards. Its imposing aura was too terrifying, and it was like an immovable divine mountain crushing down towards him, causing Xianxia to feel suffocated. Let's begin. Right at this moment, the tiny cauldron whistled up while dragging along a myriad of strands of divine radiance behind it, and it swiftly appeared above the river of lava and smashed down. Roar! The Yin Fish King was alarmed and let out a furious roar that shook the heavens. Its tail tore through the sky and caused a myriad of enormous waves of lava to arise as it resisted the tiny cauldron. Rumble! It was like two volcanoes colliding. 1,000 layers of waves splashed out from the river of fiery refinement, and the tearing fluctuation raged through the surroundings and enveloped the heavens and the earth. Such an attack had exceeded the scope of Xianxia's understanding because with a single move, the heavens and the earth were overturned, and the sky had gone dim. It caused others to suspect that even the combat strength of Saint Immortal realm experts was probably unable to possess such might. Swoosh! Xianxia didn't dare think any further, and practically at the same instant that the tiny cauldron made a move, he raised his hand and formed a seal before scooping up the yin fish within the river below. This seal covered an area of 3 kilometers and was suffused with the energy of the 5-element divine crest. It seemed to be a casual scooping action, yet Xianxia's entire strength was circulating within it, causing even space to shatter like paper before it. Swish! Unlike the Yin Fish King that the tiny cauldron was fighting, it could be said to have gone extremely smoothly for Xianxia, and it was even to the extent that it slightly seemed as if he'd exerted too much strength for a simple task. Without practically any obstruction, he scooped up the entire group of yin fish that he'd locked onto since the beginning and caught them at once. This was very understandable because the yin fish had been assaulted by the aura of the heaven dance flowers, causing their minds to be dazed. They were like numerous frozen puppets, so they naturally couldn't bring forth much resistance. 19 of them. Xianxia was delighted in his heart and hurriedly confined these yin fish with the grand confinement Tao arts. After that, he casually wiped out their mental ability before placing them in the Buddha's pagoda. In this way, even if they were to wake up, it would be impossible for them to kill themselves. After he finished all of this, Xianxia raised his eyes and sized up the battlefield above the river. The bridge to the deep was extremely miraculous indeed. The battle between the tiny cauldron and the Yin Fish King was extraordinarily intense, yet it was actually unable to damage the bridge in the slightest. Besides that, as Xianxia stood on the bridge, he was similarly able to avoid being affected by the aftershock of the terrifying battle. Otherwise, if he merely relied on his current strength, then he would have no choice but to move aside a long time ago and not dare approach this area at all. Rumble! At this moment, the tiny cauldron had transformed into a 27 tall ancient jade cauldron. It was completely suffused with primordial chaotic chi, and every single strike it executed carried an imposing aura of supremacy and domination. Even space was smashed apart into pieces by it, causing terrifying scars to be fully revealed in space. Compared to this, the strength of the Yin Fish King wasn't much inferior. Its tail waved through the air like a sharp blade tearing through the sky, and it threw the heavens and the earth into chaos while emanating the supreme profundities of Tai Chi. Yes, it was indeed the aura of the Grand Tao of Tai Chi. Xianxia noticed it very clearly. Every single attack of the Yin Fish King was flawless and perfect. The tiny cauldron's attacks were extremely formidable, yet it was actually unable to suppress the Yin Fish King in a short period of time. Early on in the primeval battlefield, Xianxia had witnessed the formidableness of the Grand Tao of Tai Chi when Zhen Luqing and Qing Shui joined forces. But that was Tao insight, whereas the Yin Fish King was executing the laws of Tai Chi. What was Tai Chi? It was yin and yang fused together, darkness and light placed together. It revealed the perfectness and flawlessness of the heaven Tao. When Tai Chi is born, the 4 symbols are born, and they circulate without end to bright forth boundless profundity. This was a type of rare Grand Tao law. Strictly speaking, it was a golden immortal law that contained the Grand Tao laws of yin, yang, darkness, and light. Only golden immortal laws were able to accommodate and dense numerous Grand Tao laws into one. A primeval variant beast actually possesses the might of Tai Chi. If it's in the outside world, it would have probably become an overlord-level existence in a continent. Besides exclaiming with admiration in his heart, Xianxia couldn't help but be extremely worried for the tiny cauldron. This was the territory of the Yin Fish King. If it was to escape, then all their efforts would have been for nothing. Unfortunately, with Xianxia's current ability, He could only watch from the sidelines and was utterly unable to interfere in a battle of such level. Ancestor was right. A yin-yang fish king really does exist within this river of fiery refinement. Quickly make a move. We must capture this beast. It's a precious treasure that can only be chanced upon by luck, and it's impossible to find in the 3 dimensions. Quickly utilize the ancient immortal treasure. Right at this moment, a wave of bustling noise sounded out from the depths of the passageway, and it caused Xianxia's expression to instantly sink. Never had he expected that others would come disturb the tiny cauldron at this moment. Before Xianxia could stop them, a wave of terrifying fluctuations of immortal treasure swarmed over and tore through space while emanating various terrifying divine radiances. They shot successively towards the yin-yang fish king in the distance. The impetus of these attacks was simply terrifying to the extreme, and it caused Xianxia's scalp to go numb because it was numerous ancient immortal treasures that had attacked in unison. Every single one of them was on par with the Sky-Earth Gourd's might, and when utilized in unison, they were naturally terrifying to the extreme. These bastards! Xianxia's expressions instantly became extremely gloomy, while killing intent shot out from his black eyes. At the instant he saw those ancient immortal treasures, Xianxia finally recognized who they were. The Great Desolation Academy, Bitter Silence Academy, Dao Secret Academy, and Dao Emperor Academy, because those 4 ancient immortal treasures came from these academies. Especially the chaotic yin-yang diagram, it was a precious treasure Xianxia had given to Ao Zhanbei, so how could Xianxia not recognize it? Very good. Besides the students of Cloud Mist Academy, Windstream Academy, and Vast Sky Academy, everyone else has converged here now. Ao Zhanbei and the others are really capable. They turned a blind eye to someone from their own academy and are taking advantage of the situation I'm in as well. Xianxia gnashed his teeth with hatred. The yin-yang fish king was a primeval variant beast that was even rarer than yin-yang fish, and it was extinct in the 3 dimensions since a long time ago. How could he have imagined that others would come and try to take advantage of him at a time like this? Rumble. In the sky above the river of fiery refinement, the battle erupted. The ancient immortal treasures fluttered through the sky and encircled the yin-yang fish king, causing the advantageous position the tiny cauldron occupied earlier to be instantly destroyed. However, the tiny cauldron was extremely composed and didn't give in at all. Whose treasure is that jade cauldron? It's actually on par with our ancient immortal treasures. I don't know. It's probably the treasure of one of the 7 academies. Could it be that there's someone else nearby? Over there, at the center of the bridge. So it's him, that student from Dao Emperor Academy, Xianxia. Xianxia. He actually really came in by himself? A wave of clamorous noise sounded out from afar, and then numerous figures flashed over. All of them were students from the academies, and the figures of Ao Zhanbei and Zhuqiujun were shockingly amongst them. However, he didn't notice Jin Lu, Zhao Mingli, and Ji Xianbing. When they noticed Xianxia, the students from the other academies were stunned before revealing vigilant and cautious expressions, whereas the faces of Zhuqiujun and the others sank while a wisp of hatred surged onto the space between their brows. Everyone, all of you have noticed as well that this yin-yang fish king was noticed by the student of our Dao Emperor Academy. So please leave as soon as possible. Ao Zhanbei suddenly roared loudly, and it shook through the surroundings like a thunderclap. Xianxia started laughing from extreme rage when he heard this because Ao Zhanbei seemed as if he intended to protect Xianxia. Yet Ao Zhanbei had utilized the name of Dao Emperor Academy to do it, and he was actually doing this for the sake of seizing the yin-yang fish king. The fortune of the heavens and the earth belong to those who are destined to obtain them. This yin-yang fish king doesn't belong to your Dao Emperor Academy. Exactly, we fight for treasures by relying on our own strength. So on what basis should we withdraw for your Dao Emperor Academy? Simply absurd. The students of the other academies instantly grouped together to resist Ao Zhanbei and the others. At this moment, both their sides had disregarded Xianxia's existence. The scene was instantly filled with a confrontational atmosphere and was completely chaotic. However, even at this moment, none of them had stopped their attacks to seize the yin-yang fish king. Fuck off! Suddenly, Xianxia shouted loudly, and it reverberated through the world like a thunderclap, causing the both sides that were in confrontation to be stunned. Kid, what did you say? The expressions of the students from the other academies turned grim, and they look at Xianxia with hostile gazes. Xianxia, quickly come over here and we'll deal with these bastards together. Ao Zhanbei and the others hadn't realized the meaning behind Xianxia's words, and they tried to make Xianxia join them. I said all of you should fuck off right now. Immediately, an icy cold and indifferent voice instantly left Xianxia's mouth, and it revealed a wisp of murderous intent. It instantly resounded throughout the surroundings, and it caused the expressions of both Ao Zhanbei's group and the students of the other academies to turn gloomy. No one had expected that Xianxia, who was all alone, would actually dare speak such words at this moment. This had exceeded their expectations, and it caused them to feel that their pride had been insulted, especially Ao Zhanbei's group. All of them felt Xianxia was truly insensible and was running wild. You actually dare speak so arrogantly? You're simply courting death. Allow me to teach you a lesson. A young man from Bitter Silence Academy was unable to restrain himself and charged out abruptly. He instantly teleported to arrive before Xianxia, and then his palm slapped down towards Xianxia's forehead. His palm carried a powerful force and seemed like a falling sun. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak about teaching me a lesson? A wisp of an icy cold arc appeared on the corners of Xianxia's mouth while a cold light flashed in his eyes. He suddenly raised his leg and stomped fiercely onto the young man's body before his slap could fully descend. Bang! This young man arrived quickly and left quickly as well. He was stomped on to the point his chest collapsed inch by inch while fresh blood sprayed from his mouth, and his figure drew out a long arc of afterimages in the sky before falling where he stood earlier. Everyone present was shocked and felt slight disbelief because all of this had occurred too quickly, and it caused some of them to be unable to realize what had happened before they saw that young man from Bitter Silence Academy had fallen back onto the ground while heavily injured. Attack together and kill this kid. All the students from Bitter Silence Academy had gloomy expressions as they shouted explosively in succession. This shout hadn't finished resounding through the air when numerous figures charged towards Xianxia. It was the students of Bitter Silence Academy. Besides the student in the lead who was controlling the ancient immortal treasure to deal with the Yin Fish King, the rest of the students had charged out in unison. Instantly, numerous figures tore through the sky and approached Xianxia from all directions in an extremely domineering manner. Just like Vast Sky Academy, Bitter Silence Academy had been challenged by Yun Fuxing all those years ago, and the outcome was the same. Yun Fuxing made a clean sweep of all the experts of the same generation, causing their reputation to sweep the floor. This caused them to innately feel hatred towards students of Dao Emperor Academy, whereas Xianxia's actions of blasting back a companion of theirs was like a fuse that completely lit their rage ablaze. Kill! Numerous terrifying techniques tore through the sky and converged into a torrent that sprayed down towards Xianxia from afar while carrying an extremely oppressive impetus. Don't do anything. Xianxia brought this onto himself. Didn't all of you hear that he asked us to fuck off as well? Many senior students from Dao Emperor Academy frowned when they saw this scene, and they intended to make a move and stop this. Yet they were stopped by Wuxia. It won't be too late to make a move after he suffers and has no choice but to seek help from us. This is also a painful lesson for him so that he won't be so arrogant in the future. The others instantly went silent when they heard this, and they tacitly approved of Wuxia's actions because Xianxia's reproach from before caused them to feel embarrassed as well. Since Wuxia had said this, they were naturally happy to make use of this opportunity. On the other hand, the students of the other academies who were on guard heaved sighs of relief when they saw this, and then a wisp of pleasure from Xianxia's misfortune arose in their hearts. Xianxia's relations with others are really terrifying. Even the students from his own academy aren't willing to help him. Perhaps it's because he's too arrogant. However, to the surprise of everyone present here, right at the moment those students from Bitter Silence Academy made a move, Xianxia actually made a move before them, and he was even more domineering than they'd expected. Xianxia had really erupted. He'd had enough of these people long ago. Not only had they disturbed the tiny cauldron from capturing the Yin Fish King, they even desired to take advantage of the situation. They were simply going too far. Most importantly, he wanted to help the tiny cauldron. Those ancient immortal treasures were controlled by those students before him, and so long as he forced them to have no choice but to fight him, then the pressure those 4 ancient immortal treasures gave the tiny cauldron would be resolved. Bang! The techniques of those students from Bitter Silence Academy soared through the sky and converged together like a fiery red mountain before crushing down at Xianxia. Numerous strands of crimson flames with terrifying auras shot out from the mountain, and they perfectly fused with the laws of fire in the surroundings. This showed that these students from Bitter Silence Academy weren't ordinary people, and they were still able to fully utilize the surrounding environment in such a sudden battle. Unfortunately, even though they hadn't overestimated themselves, they'd underestimated their opponent this time. Xianxia's expression was cold and indifferent while his entire body was suffused with the brilliant gold radiance of a golden immortal. His slender and fair palm held Starclasp, and then it flashed casually before causing a myriad of sword waves to whistle over. This was the sword of water, boundless ocean. The only difference was that this strike contained the might of the 5-element divine crest. Bang! The fiery red mountain was crushed into pieces by this strike, and it transformed into sparks that covered the sky as they poured down. It caused everyone to wonder if that fiery red mountain was made of paper because it couldn't even withstand a single strike. What? Everyone was shocked. Subsequently, sword chi shot out horizontally and vertically from Xianxia while the 5 elements circulated, and then immortal force that was an entire 100 times plus greater than his peers erupted. Instantly, it enveloped every single person before him. No! Those students from Bitter Silence Academy were astounded and resisted with everything they had. They circulated their immortal force with all their might and executed various formidable techniques. Yet it was utterly useless before Xianxia's sword chi that contained the might of the 5-element divine crest. Bang! 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 In practically an instant, numerous figures let out shrill cries while being blasted flying. They were scattered all over the ground and were either spitting out blood, had broken bones, or suffered a heavy injury to the soul. Not a single one of them was unharmed. This scene just happened to seem like autumn wind sweeping away dry leaves. It was completed in one go and made an overbearing clean sweep of them. No one could bear the brunt of his might. This scene astounded the students from the other academies to the point of feeling extremely horrified. Never had they imagined that Xianxia would actually reveal such abnormal combat strength while all alone, and as he stood on the bridge to the deep, he seemed to reveal the arrogant aura of one who could hold back all of them. It was even to the extent that a thought couldn't help but float up into their minds. When Yun Fuxing challenged the 3 academies by himself while at the Golden Immortal Realm, was his combat strength so heaven-defying as well? How did this damnable bastard's combat strength become so formidable? Zhuo Jun's heart jerked while his expression was extremely gloomy. Ao Zhanbei and the others were surprised and bewildered as well. The combat strength she revealed was so formidable that it exceeded their expectations as well. Junior brothers! When he saw the defeat of all the students from his academy, the expression of the young man who was controlling the ancient immortal treasure to seize the Yin-Yang Fish King turned grim, and his eyes almost split apart as he shouted explosively. In the next moment, he suddenly withdrew the ancient immortal treasure, and it rumbled as it smashed down towards Xianxia. The ancient immortal treasure was an ancient perfectly square-shaped seal. It was completely suffused with dark green radiance, and its surface was inscribed with a layer of obscure and profound striations. The aura it emanated was extremely violent and seemed capable of splitting apart the heavens and the earth, and even smash a hole in the Grand Tao. This was the Heaven Hatred Seal, a precious treasure passed down in Bitter Silence Academy that was on par with the Sky-Earth Gourd. According to legend, there were altogether 4 immortal seals called Heaven Hatred, Heaven Overturn, Heaven Incineration, and Heaven Destruction. All of them were formidable immortal treasures that shook the 3 dimensions. However, along with the passage of time, only the Heaven Hatred Seal still remained in Bitter Silence Academy, whereas the other 3 ancient immortal seals had vanished in the immortal dimension and had never made an appearance. At this moment, as soon as the Heaven Hatred Seal was utilized, a violent force tore through the sky while emanating rumbling that sounded like thunderclaps, and its dark green glow illuminated the heavens and the earth, while the impetus it revealed was terrifying to the extreme. Heaven hatred seal. Boundless hatred that even the heavens are unable to resist, and the earth is unable to block. Is peerlessly violent. This might really is shocking, the others in the surroundings exclaimed with shock. Xianxia's eyes narrowed while his expression was composed as before. Only Starclasp that lay in his hand erupted with a myriad of rays of starlight, and when he swung it, it seemed to carry countless stars as it moved. Clang! Heaven hatred seal collided with Starclasp, and the sound of the collision was like thunder that descended from the 9 heavens. It was a deafening sound that caused the auras of many students present here to roil without end. On the other hand, the aftershock caused by the collision was even more terrifying. It swept towards the surroundings and enveloped the entire bridge. If it wasn't for this bridge possessing a shapeless force field of its own that protected it, merely this strike would have probably been sufficient to transform it into powder. However, this wasn't what made everyone astounded, and it was instead because the heaven hatred seal was actually struck back a few meters from the collision with Xianxia's sword. Moreover, it trembled violently and almost escaped the control of that young man. On the other hand, Xianxia had merely taken 3 steps back, and besides this, he was actually completely unharmed to the point even his aura remained the same. Isn't this fellow a bit too strong? Even an ancient immortal treasure is unable to suppress him. Obviously, it's because his strength is too formidable. Unfortunately, Xianxia is unable to bring forth the entire might of the heaven hatred seal. Otherwise, merely this strike would be able to smash that kid into a biscuit. Everyone present here frowned, and they felt that Xianxia's combat strength was too formidable. On the other hand, the expression of the young man from Bitter Silence Academy called Xianxia was surprised and bewildered, while he calmed down greatly from his explosive rage. He was clearly aware of how formidable his attack was because even a top figure amongst his peers would find it extremely difficult to resist. Yet now, Xianxia hadn't just resisted this strike. Xianxia had even blasted the heaven hatred seal back. What did this prove? This proved that if he didn't rely on the might of the heaven hatred seal, merely this attack would cause him to directly lose to Xianxia. Swoosh! Xianxia remained utterly indifferent towards all of this. After he blasted the heaven hatred seal back, he practically didn't delay at all before charging once more. This kid's combat strength is too terrifying. Let's join forces against him. Otherwise, if he's allowed to grow, then he's bound to become the second Yun Fuxing. When they saw Xianxia charge over towards them in such a domineering manner, it wasn't just Xianxia's face that turned gloomy. The expressions of the students from the other academies turned gloomy as well, while one of them suggested that they joined forces. After practically zero contemplation, the students of the other academies agreed to this. The reason was very simple. Based on the domineering and oppressive manner Xianxia acted, it was obviously impossible for him to stop just like this. In other words, if they continued watching from the sidelines, then Xianxia would come looking for trouble for them in the end. Swish! A shimmering glass palace lantern flew up. Hiss! A bronze sword that was mottled with rust rose into the sky. The body of the sword emanated a murderous aura that minced space apart. These were 2 ancient immortal treasures called Green Silk Palace Lantern and Bloodmaster Sword. They were respectively from Great Desolation Academy and Dao Secret Academy. They were ancient immortal treasures on par with the Sky-Earth Gourd and Heaven Hatred Seal, and they each had profundities and abilities of their own. In other words, at this instant, the students of Great Desolation Academy and Dao Secret Academy had withdrawn their ancient immortal treasures and stopped fighting for the Yin-Yang Fish King, and they'd locked onto Xianxia instead. This obviously showed how great the pressure they felt from witnessing Xianxia's terrifying combat strength was. Heh! That kid is dead for sure now. Zuoqiujun laughed coldly and still watched idly from the side, and he instructed the other senior students from Dao Emperor Academy. Everyone, please don't stop them. Junior brother Xianxia is creating an enormous opportunity for all of us. We must seize this opportunity to cooperate with senior brother Ao Zhanbei and capture the Yin-Yang Fish King with all our might. Otherwise, we'll let junior brother Xianxia down. Ha ha ha! As he finished speaking, He couldn't restrain himself from roaring with laughter, because he'd never expected that she would indirectly help them so greatly. Even though the others felt sorry in their hearts, when they thought about how there was no one fighting for the Yin Fish King besides the mysterious Jade Cauldron at this moment, they accepted Zhuoqiuju's suggestion. Actually, no matter who it was that saw the scene at this moment, they would definitely think she was in a situation where danger was imminent. But she heaved a sigh of relief in his heart instead, because in this way, the pressure he faced would increase greatly, yet it would also relieve the pressure the tiny cauldron is facing. In his opinion, this was more than enough. Humph. It's fine if all of you look on indifferently from the side. I never hoped that all of you would help me sincerely. She glanced out of the corner of his eyes and instantly saw the expressions of Zhuoqiujun and the others clearly, besides laughing coldly in his heart. His movements weren't slow at all as his figure tore through the sky and charged forward with sword in hand.